Man, what's really good though, family tree? We are live in the building right now. This is actually Scattered Minds and Talk with the Titans production right now. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. This is the first of the Scattered Minds link up with Titans TV. We've got the brothers, Shakara is in the building, and of course the Scattered Minds team is in the building as well. So you know what I'm literally gonna do is hand over the show to the brothers, and we're gonna get it in. I know a lot of you guys would love for me to discuss, the Toby Robinson event today and all of that good stuff, and just catch up with that. But I'm tired right now. I'm tired. I'm pretty sure that the brothers will jump in and give their view of what went down. But you got to ask them those questions, okay? Just ask them those questions. But today the show is called Do Arabs Belong in Africa? The brothers will explain a bit further what that actually means. And I hope you guys will actually partake, jump in, join the conversation, share the link, and get down with us, baby. Get down with us. All right, brother. Take over.
Sorry, let me on mic on. Calm. Blessed Kalam. Blessed everybody in the chat room. Scatter minds. Oh man, yeah, and I had to do that for Kalam and Titans TV. Shout out to everybody in here. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about if Arabs belong in Africa. Do Arabs have a place in Africa? It's just a general question. It's a topic. It's a topic within Pan-Africanism more generally. If you know me and you know Scatter Minds Show, and if you don't know Scatter Minds Show, just open a new tab, go to YouTube. Type in Scattered Minds, find us, subscribe to us, and you'll find we discuss Pan-Africanism and topics around Pan-Africanism generally. And I'll explain a little bit about what it is in a little bit. But shout out to everybody in the chat room. Yes, I will be taking questions as well from the chat room. So just at me, and it will highlight so I can see who's asking questions. So before we get into the Arab question and asking whether, or the North African question and asking whether Arabs belong in Africa, we will be discussing the Tommy Robinson review, having a quick little review about his case today and some of the stuff that went on. I think he's out. I think he's free. Sorry, 1 second. Let me fix my camera there. I think he's free. But we'll come to that. But on the panel with me, first up, I got Shaka Ras. I'm going to let him introduce himself, promote his channel a little bit, because he's also a prominent speaker within the Pan-Africanist conscious community. He's been to Speaker's Corner a couple of times now. A lot of people seem to like him. I like a lot what he's got to say. And I think this topic is something he has something to say about. So I'm going to hand over to Shakara quickly. And then, we'll get into this topic, into the show quickly. You there?
Hold on.
There we go.
Microphone check 1, 2.
Yeah.
Yes, greetings, 10-9Y family. Give thanks to Scattered Minds for inviting me to share, in this particular conversation. Yeah, my name is Shakara, I'm saying? I am a born and raised member of the Al-Qibla Revivalist movement, which means I'm a Pan-Africanist from birth until now, an activist, I'm an educator, I'm a journalist, I'm a spoken word artist, among many other things, you know what I mean? So yeah, my channel, I have my own channel, which is Shakara Speaks. My name is spelled Shakara. Speaks, that's my own personal channel. So yeah, check that out when you want to. I do many different things related to spoken word, and also recently, having become a father, I am just documenting that particular journey as well. Important conversations that I feel like, our community needs to hear in terms of Black men discussing the fatherhood thing. And also I'm one of the directors of Got Kush TV. So you can check that out as well. That's Got Kush, Kush TV. Subscribe to the thing, you know what I mean? I'm going to say right now, it's probably even more important that you subscribe to Got Kush TV than my own personal channel. That might sound stupid, but Got Kush TV is doing some serious work. So yeah, once again, big up to Scattered Minds, shout out to Titans TV, and everyone listening. I'm just humbled to be a part of the conversation.
Yes, shout out to you. Yeah. So we'll get into the conversation. So before we start this here, I just wanted to shout out to anybody in the chat room. If you wanted to get involved in this conversation, if you have something to say about this, let me know. It's particularly about the if Arabs belong in Africa. Shout out. Let me know in the chat room. Just at Scattered Minds, I'll see it and I'll send you the link, and then you could jump into the chat room with us or into the onto the panel with us. Obviously, you have to respect the Titans TV rules. No swearing. Keep your microphones on mute at all time, and all of them things there. So yeah, so Tony Robinson review. I'm not sure how much. Sorry, I'm not sure how much you got to see of the Tony Robinson review. I watched it I watched a little bit of it today. I saw some of the trial. It was interesting because like I wasn't expecting that. I didn't know it was on today. I was at work. I see it come up on the screen on my YouTube that people were down there, content of everything, Titans TV, all the man them were down there. For me, I don't really care. I don't care about Tony Robinson. He's not necessarily my particular cup of tea. I'm not bothered by him. I could see this causing a little bit of controversy at Speaker's Corner. Apparently, a lot of these guys now are feeling energized by Tony Robinson. They're going to come down to the park. So it'll be interesting to see what that means and what people are saying this Sunday. It'll make for an interesting atmosphere. But for me, I'm not on the Tony Robinson, the Tony Robinson wave. I'm not really like, I don't really feel.
It's a dead motive still.
Yeah, it's a dead motive. There you go.
It's a dead motive still.
Yeah, it's flawless in the building.
Therefore, why not? But yeah, it's a dead motive, that whole Tony Robinson thing.
What are you saying, Shakara?
No, I agree. I didn't watch none of it today. I didn't even know about it. It's only because I was online earlier and I saw content over everything broadcasting from their live. So I don't know what was going on. I have no idea what going for the case. My thing with Tommy Robinson and people like him is that for the most part they're a distraction from the real thing while going around here. It's like when a few years ago, before like the EDO was a proper like, you know, household name. Everyone was running around talking about, you know what I mean? We need to vote Labour to make sure that the BNP don't get in, yeah? And I was like, it's a joke thing, my G, because really and truly, yeah, the BNP ain't never really been in power. They're not responsible for the high, you know, incarceration rates of black people or the underachievement in black schools or our overrepresentation in the mental health institutions. And so I feel when you get these far right wing groups that come up here and they spit all this rhetoric, yeah, sometimes it's a distraction from us actually addressing the actual real everyday, you know, acts of white supremacy, institutions of white supremacy that are affecting our lives daily. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like I said, I'm not even aware if what I just said even relates to what exactly is going on with Tommy Robinson right about now. I'm just talking in terms of the EDO in general, yeah? You know what I mean? And what these forces actually represent. Oftentimes, we get so caught up by them and their role is to validate the system as it stands, yeah? So because we don't want the EDO to get in power, we give the Labour Party and the Conservatives a pass. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to fall into that distraction right there. You know what I mean?
No, I hear that definitely. It is a big distraction right now. Interesting you should bring that up actually. I got a couple of things to say about the Labour Party in a second. But yeah, like that's what I was thinking of. Like, what's the name? The whole Tommy Robinson thing and the whole EDL thing is a massive distraction from the big problem. I was even saying this to a couple of EDL guys recently that, you know, if you focus on the main issues and the main issues affecting the issues in the white community is broken homes and families. This is what's leading to their girls being in care in the first place. So if we cut down on some of these issues within the wider British community, we'd probably cut out a lot of the grooming issues that they seem to have such a big problem with. And if you want to talk about like immigration or what's the thing called? Oh, sorry, like immigration or the Muslims coming into this country and so on. I think the bigger issue that they should focus on is their own government, and they should focus on dealing with that rather than focusing on everybody else. And that would be my advice onto that side. But as you say, onto our side, it's not a big issue. Focusing on these right-wing groups isn't really the problem. They don't really affect black people on a day-to-day basis, like you're saying. But on party politics, do you believe in voting, and do you think black people should vote?
I'm not an advocate of voting. Let's put it that way. I'm not totally against it. I've never voted in my life because I've never seen anything worth voting for. I think that black people should vote collectively in an organized fashion. So because I don't have faith in the voting system, I'm not into voting as an individual. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? No, I don't believe that casting my vote is what gives me a say in this society and them kind of things there. I think that our vote is best used when it's organized and we have a specific agenda. Yeah. That said, if you are, like, for example, in your borough, local politics and them kind of things there, if there is a specific agenda that you have on the ballot and there is a candidate representing that, I'm not against our people voting in you know, them kind of strategic manners there. But yeah, I just feel like we should be more organized as a people. We need to have an agenda before we start voting, if that makes sense. Especially when it comes to national politics, prime ministers and them kind of things there. We just need to have an agenda. So yeah.
Yeah, I seen that on the last show. I'm not sure if you saw the Black Culture show that I done with Kalam and Tynes TV on Tuesday. We were discussing some of this, and I was saying that somebody was saying, how do you stop other people coming in to our community with their agendas for us? And I said the answer to that is by having an agenda of our own. So, for example, there's a lot of people who are worried about, like nowadays, worried about like Islam coming into the Black community and radicalizing young Black youth to go over to Syria and places like this, basically. There's a lot of people worried about that. And I say, basically, even as a young Black Muslim myself, like if we have our own agenda, like I've always grown up with agenda set by my parents of Pan-Africanism, do you know what I mean? So if we have our own agenda for ourselves and for our own communities, we don't have to worry about our communities being affected by other people's agendas, do you know what I mean? The problem is we don't usually have an agenda. We don't usually have a goal or idea. We just know, we just talk about the system, but we don't really talk about how we're fighting or resisting against this system, do you know what I mean? And like you say, voting, in my opinion, it's like you got many levers in life, and voting is just one of the levers. But if you pull that lever and put all your weight behind it and think that's going to change everything in your life, it's going to be like the Obama effect, do you know what I mean? Where Black Americans all got together, voted for Obama, felt, yeah, it's done now, we're good. And then 4 years down the line, 8 years down the line, they ain't so good anymore. Do you know what I mean? So you got to not just pull that lever of voting, you got to do other things in your community and build other works in that meantime as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that I don't know, it's like we want to fight the system, but we still got this mysticism and attachment to it. You know what I'm saying? So like I come across people every time, you know, the general election comes around that are actually mortified, yeah, like that you're not voting. You know what I mean? They want to convince you, like, you know what I'm saying, about why you're not voting, and then, you know, you don't have a voice if you don't vote. In fact, I randomly, yeah, I don't go into bookies, yeah. But the last election year, because I predicted it was going to be a hung parliament, innit? Yeah. But I realized that they take bets on the vote. You know what I'm saying, on the election. Yeah? So I stepped in and I was actually going to bet on this thing. Yeah, I never did it, right? But I wanted to check the odds. That's why I wanted to see what the odds were. Yeah, on the hung parliament. So I stepped in and I said, you know what I mean? Yeah, like man just wants to know what the odds are in it on the election. Yeah. And the woman didn't even give me the odds before she said to me, "Are you gonna vote?" A sister as well, you know. "Are you voting?" I said to her, "Nah." "What do you mean you're not voting?" This is the woman behind the counter, you know, and the bookies and that. She was just supposed to take money, yeah, and place my bet, yeah. Once in the debate, I'm not voting, you know what I mean? So I just never understand, like, why we have so much faith. What is it about the vote and these parties that leads us to have so much faith? And oftentimes we have more faith in these political parties that have continuously put in place policies that have disenfranchised us in so many different ways. More faith in them than we have in people in our communities that are doing positive work. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's a complete paradox to me that Black community organizations have a worse representation in the Black community than mainstream political parties. That don't make no sense. You know what I mean? So yeah, you know, I don't know where that comes from, but it's something that we've got to work out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, we'll work it out for sure. Let me just look into the chat room quickly. I'm going to drop the link in now for anybody who wants to jump in and get on either the conversation we're having right now or the next conversation we're going to be having about Arabs in Africa and whether do Arabs belong in Africa. So I'll jump the link in now. Yes. Anybody who wants to jump in, feel free to jump in. Also, shout out to John Henry. I see you at me a couple of times. If you want to jump in particularly, feel free. You're challenging me on my Pan-Africanist credentials. I like it. Something about ECOWAS or something like that. I think it's the Economic Community of West African States or something like that. No, I don't know completely much about it. I know that they are. There's definitely several Pan-African institutions working in Africa right now to implement different economic strategies along different variable lines, basically. And ECOWAS is one of those community groups. You asked me something else. I can't. What's that? No, the African tribal Ghana was originally from North Africa. Have you heard this information? We've heard a lot of different tribes information about the African tribes. So I'll discuss a little bit about that in the conversation about whether Arabs were in North Africa or whether Arabs belong in North Africa. But I'm dropping the link in the chat again, just in case anybody didn't see it. Here's your chance to jump in.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, please do.
All right. You know when two people are pile up and agree with each other too much after just bringing some form of confusion, not confusion, but conflict. That's the word, conflict. And I have to say, I disagree. I have to disagree with you guys, man. I think that the problem is, we as a people are disenfranchised and we don't feel as though that we belong in the UK as much. We don't feel as though that we are part of the UK. We don't feel as though our voice actually will make a difference. And I think that we need to start changing that idea, because that idea is detrimental to us. I think that we should take part inside of the political system itself. The brother Shakira was right. We should have our own agenda as a community. We definitely should. But the problem is we are not even a community. We're only a pseudo community. We should start building communities. We should start building or constructing agendas. We should start lobbying. We should start having policymakers in play. We should start having MPs that are there for our own benefit as well. We should, really, how can I put it, put our anchor into the UK political system so we can make a difference. We can have our voices be heard and make a change in the UK and stop simply complaining about, the UK and the world and how things are going. We should try ourselves to actually be the change that we want to see in the world.
Cool. I agree with that. I do agree with that.
As the way, Captain Scarlet, as the way.
But the point is, like you're saying though, we don't have a community yet. And I think, like I say, voting is just one of the levers that we pull. So I pull that lever myself. I vote when I go out, when elections come around. However, I think the issue is that what certain people do is they start looking at voting like that is the be all and the end all of the change. And I do think there is probably a disconnect that we do feel from British culture as African Caribbean people and so on. But I don't think that's necessarily such a bad thing. I feel like our disconnect, we want to be a part of the British culture, be within Britain, but we don't want to lose our own culture to do that. Do you know what I mean? It's about retaining our own culture whilst being good British citizens. So we abide by the law mostly. We pay our taxes. We don't really cause no problems for people. We get along with our lives normally. We just want to basically focus on building up our own community, which we haven't, to be fair, focused on enough of, which hopefully we'll do in this show.
Yeah, no, man's agreeing with that. And my thing is that exactly what you just said, yeah. Because like I said, it's about having an agenda first, isn't it? And I think that for a lot of us, for example, yeah, I teach in an African-centered homeschoolers group, right, and Saturday school. And one of the things that we teach them is civics, yeah? So we educate young people about the voting system. And enough of the teachers have never voted in their life. But it's important, we feel like it's important for these children who have grown up to be adults to know how to politically engage, yeah, or the political structure of their society and system. Now, those are lessons that I never got in mainstream schooling in this country. Yeah, we weren't taught civics and about the voting system, local politics and them kind of things there. And I am convinced, and they have these debates every time there's an election as to what percentage of the population as it stands is actually educated and engaged voters. Yeah. And by my estimation, many of us in the Black community are not active, proactive engagers in the political system, or ones who even, especially among the working class population in general, the level of understanding as to the political structure and how it works is often very low. So I would say before we have a voting drive in the Black community, we need a voter education drive, a political civics, you know what I mean, education drive among us, so that we know what the hell we're doing when we go into the voting booth. You know what I mean?
What do you think, Alice?
What's up? When it comes to the voting,
yeah.
To be honest, I've like I said, I've voted a couple times, and not much has really come from it. So it's not like you said. There's not much faith in voting in the first place. But at the same time, you understand that me, or as a one person just doing it, is not going to change much. It's got to be a good effort.
Yeah.
Can I say something real quick if it's all right?
Yeah, I'm going to say, let me introduce a couple of people. We got a couple of people in the chat. So that's that Mad, and we got Yoon. So go ahead, Mad. Go first.
Yeah, what's going on, people? Yeah, now I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think, voting is bullshit. It's sorry, I need to what's the language? Excuse me.
Yeah,
I think voting is not necessarily the plan. But I think we have to start off from the root. Do you understand what I'm saying? And the root for me, we'll start off with nationality. Now, personally, I think when you deal with nationality, that in itself is a separation, right? And when you attach yourself to that type of post-colonial identity, then already you're dealing with a separation type of situation. I think we need to have a collective nationality as a people. We need to stop seeing ourselves as, oh, I'm for instance, my family are from Ghana, so I'll say I'm a Ghanaian. But the truth of the matter is, I'm not a Ghanaian. I'm an Akan. And when you actually start going to your root and you start finding out your root, okay, of who you are, and the fact that your nationality does not actually determine, you know, your biological makeup or anything like that. It's just literally, you know, for instance, you get Ghanaians that actually are not biologically Ghanaian. I mean, so they are not actually Ghanaian by, you know, DNA in Ghana, and they'll still consider themselves Ghanaians. You know, it's just a nationality. It doesn't matter. So what I'm basically trying to say is we need to start thinking of ways collectively to basically get rid of the whitewashing, to get rid of the ideas that have been placed into our identities and into our cultures for years and years and years that we basically copy and we use in our societies. That is by far the biggest issues. We need to start thinking, okay, so what has been used against us? Maybe religion, maybe language, maybe what can I say? Maybe nationality. We need to start rebuilding each of these layers step by step, collectively, and then starting from there, in my opinion.
All right, calm. Bless for that, man. I want to respond. I want to let Shaka respond, but Yunes, you're in the building. I beg you, let's hear your voice. Yo, Yunes, am I saying your name wrong? I'm unmuting your mic for you now. Like,
can you hear me?
Yeah, is that you? Yeah.
Yeah, this is John Henry talking. There's a guy there called Shakara or something. You are talking about voting, but I'm curious, who are you to criticize voting? You don't even vote. So how can you complain about voting if you don't even vote? That doesn't make any sense.
All right, brother, I'll come back to you in a second. Yeah, let me get Yunes, are you in the building? If you're not, you have to jump out the way. And Mr. F, you in the building? Got some randoms on. I could handle this though. And then who else just joined in? Byzantine, you in the building?
Right.
What's good?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like voting. I think we're moving ahead of ourselves as far as voting. I mean, even here in America, what Black people need to do is first do what Israel did and first find collectively come together, even though we have different nationalities, as one political group that we can move forward. Then after we move forward with that, then we can start the voting. We haven't even unified on that level yet. We're still bickering about nationalities, and we haven't collectively came together as a political people, as Israel is a collective of different types of European people. We need to do the same, follow suit with them as what they did, and then we could do it for ourselves. And then we can start voting and start doing all these other things when we empower ourselves as a collective.
All right, cool. I don't want to stay too long on the voting topic because that is just a side topic, and I do want to go into this do as belonging to Africa topic. But I'm going to let Shakara, you got called out there, so I'm going to let you respond to that one quickly, and then we'll move it on.
Sorry, can you also respond to my little my section about nationality and how we shouldn't use that as well?
Yeah, for sure.
So was you asking me to respond to that, or Scattered Minds?
It's just both you what you think, Shakara and Scattered Minds, what you think about, you know, not having a nationality and going back and, you know, rebuilding our nationalities, or not even our nationalities, but our tribal indigenous way of you know, communicating with each other and identifying ourselves.
All right. Who am I to criticize voting?
Yep.
I think I'm not sure if you misheard. You know what I'm saying, what is that exactly I said, but I think I get the spirit in which you're asking the question. So you know, it's all good to be provocative. But the reality is that what I said was that I'm not really I personally don't vote. I did say I don't knock anybody that votes, especially if they're voting for a local issue and them kind of things there. I do believe that we have we kind of overcompensate in terms of what the worth of our vote actually is. What I did say though was that we should have an agenda, yeah, in a collective agenda, and outside of that, our voting is not a means through which power. I don't know what that is, but somebody needs to mute their mic there.
Yeah, like let me. If you don't mute your mic, brother, you're getting kicked out the chat for real.
Yeah, so that's really what it is. I think that we have to be strategic in terms of one, what we consider the vote to be, what we understand the vote to be, and two, how we use that vote once we've decided what our agenda is. And it's the absence of an agenda. I think we're putting the cart before the horse. We put the emphasis on the voting and before the agenda itself. Should I answer the next question, Captain Scarlett, or should I?
Yeah, please answer that, please.
Yeah. Regards to nationality, yeah, I agree. I like the term nationhood. That might just be a holdover from my personal Pan-African upbringing. We talk about nationhood, and that's partly probably because I associate nationality. Not that nationality is a wrong word, but in terms of the connotations of it, I associate it with my British passport. So I would, technically speaking, would be British by nationality. But I don't consider myself, if I consider myself a part of a nation, I would consider myself a part of an African nation or African nation in the making. I would agree that what you just basically said is one of the major kind of components of most Pan-African ideologies in terms of developing our own sense of nationhood, which always begins with a concept in our minds. Yeah, our concept of nationhood begins in our minds. So I would agree, and in particular on the issue of, you know, being a Ghanaian or not being a Ghanaian. I've been to Ghana. I love the nation of Ghana, but the reality is the borders that define the nation of Ghana were drawn up by colonizers for colonizer purposes. And so one of the ways that we're going to throw off the shackles of colonization is through getting rid of those borders and reforming or actually even creating new ideas of nationhood and nationality. So I'd agree with that. Sorry, lastly, on the point about Israel, yeah, because one of the things that we have to recognize as well in this, that there are many people who live in this country that consider themselves a parts of other nations and actually pay taxes to that nation. And so many of the Jewish people in the Jewish community over here, actually, they live over here, they're citizens, but they pay taxes to Israel, yeah, because of their sense of nationhood and nationality. And so as far as developing a sense of nationhood, that when we have, you know, governments that more represent us, that is one of the things that we can begin to consider.
All right, cool. Blessed for that. Thanks for answering both questions for me. Before we go on here, let me take a little break and get my Titans TV Kalam on. I need to see you lot to hit that like button, please. Smash that like button before we move on. 218 people watching. We got 38 likes, so you guys can get that up, please. So we can get more people out there, more people listening. We want to have this conversation right now about if Arabs are Africans. Do Arabs belong in Africa? And particularly looking at the North African region, so looking at Morocco, Algeria, Libya, all of these countries. So yeah, please, I'm seeing the lights go up, and let's get up a bit more quickly, please. And yeah, we're gonna push on. Like I said, if you have something to say, I saw Betty in the chat. Only African Caribbeans on the panel. Okay, you got in the room. Thank you. Anyone else who wants to get in, please come in. If you've got something to say, please. Sorry, 1 second. Please feel free to come in. We want to have this conversation about the history of Africa and about North Africa. So yeah, when those lights go up a little more, I will go on to the next topic. So hit the like button. And this is the time if you want to catch me with any questions, please at me so I could see. No, you got kicked out, John Henry, because you kept unmuting your mic and talking over. What's this guy talking over Shakara? Like there's rules on Titans TV, so like you gotta just talk a little bit and just respect the rules. So yeah, we got some people in the panel, a nice panel now. I'm happy to go from here. So that cool. So let me introduce the show. Yeah, we got some people in the panel. A nice panel now. I'm happy to go from here. So that cool. Dorina, please, you gotta close your YouTube, please. And or mute it, unmute your mic as well, please.
I've muted it.
Or mute it, unmute your mic as well, please.
I've muted it.
1 second, let me help you out there. So cool. Yeah, so we're gonna get into this chat about North Africa and whether Arabs belong in Africa. So yeah, let me check any questions quickly. As I said, hit the like button before we proceed, go any further. Can't see any. All right, cool. So on terms of this conversation, where's come from? So basically, I'm a Pan-Africanist. That's where I stand. That's where I take my position from. My stance, I follow the thoughts and philosophies of Marcus Garvey, but obviously I try to update them and reinterpret them for the new day and era. But obviously within Pan-Africanism, going back to 1960, there's always been this conversation about where do North Africans fit in? Are they Africans? Are they inherently African? Or are they Arab? Are they something else? Is North Africa part of the Middle East? Is it part of the Arab world, or is it part of the African world? And I know a lot of people got a lot of things to say about that. A little bit about me: I'm Captain Scholar. I do the Scat and Mind show, which is a Pan-African show. My degree is in politics and international relations. My dissertation was on Africa and African development. And so I'm very interested in this area generally. So please, if you get a chance, click on my channel, go to Scat and Mind, subscribe to that as well, please. We've got a lot of videos coming out based on on Pan-Africanism and conversations about that. And I want to take the next few weeks on Titans TV, while Kalam's letting me have this little slot on his channel, to actually build up a dialogue about Pan-Africanism, to kind of define, get some definitions down, create a code, a dialogue between how we should enact among one another and with one another as Black people or as a community. Since, as Kalam rightly said, referring to the Burn community, we don't have a community. There is no such thing as the Black community. So we're going to use these conversations to try and build a conversation around community and ideas about community. And yeah, cool. During now, that's you again. Calm. And then yeah, we're gonna. So first of all, I'm gonna give it to Shakara. I'm gonna let him take it away on this question. And the question I'm gonna ask you is: are Arabs Africans? Straight up, first of all. Yeah, I'm sticking on you like that.
Yeah. The answer to that question will be no. And I'm very aware that I'm still researching much of the history in terms of Black Arabia and them kind of things. At the same time, to whatever extent original Arabs, or many of the original Arabs, because you know, from the origin of what the term Arab meant, they were mixtures and groups of people that came together under this title, from what I understand. The term today relates specifically to a group of people, the majority of who identify as that are just not Black, yeah, and not African, not indigenous, should I say, and have no indigenous land rights to the African continent. And I am perplexed by much of the Pan-African, what's the word, you know, kind of basically apathy, yeah, on this issue. Although there are some, yeah, I take my cue, for example, from people like Baba Chinwezu, who wrote the book The West and the Rest of Us and Decolonizing the African Mind, among many other titles, and people like Kwesi Pra, yeah, who analyze this thing in terms of politics and culture. And as far as I am concerned, the Arabic presence on the African continent is no different to the European presence on the African continent. I am aware of the fact that there are Africans in North Africa who very much are oppressed and feel oppressed and will speak to that oppression. And so my allegiance lies with them just as much as my allegiance lies with the Africans in Cuba and the Africans in Venezuela and the Africans in India, yeah, and the Africans all around the world. And so when we talk about the Arabs in Africa, we must know that we're talking about invaders, yeah? And invaders, however long they've been there, don't stop being invaders because they've been there for over 1,000 years, yeah? Now, I would cry, I would turn in my grave, yeah? If 700 years from now, our descendants are talking about, well, you know what, the whites in South Africa and Zimbabwe and them thing there are now indigenous, yeah, because they've been there for a long time. And that debate is happening right now. Yeah, that debate is happening right now. So we have to be careful about how we, kind of couch this whole conversation. Lastly, if we're gonna accept that, what are we seeking to do in terms of repair, self-repair, and reparations for the conditions that North Africa finds itself in as a result of having been invaded by Arabs? You know what I'm saying? There are direct implications of that history that last up until this day. And so it appears to me that before we start accepting people, there needs to be some corrective measures at the very least. You know what I mean? So yeah.
All right, cool. Before I respond to that, I'm gonna come to Betty. Betty,
Can I say, sorry, can I say something next?
all right, come, go ahead. TN, introduce yourself.
Yeah, just to reply to what Shaka said, because I agree with a lot of what you said about Black Arabia and all that. But then when you think about who has the rights to the land, well, if we're going to go that far and say the whites and stuff, because I'm from Zimbabwe, so obviously I understand what's going on there, and I don't like how, you know, the whites are basically taking over what we built and like our nationality. But if you deep it there, like even the Khoisan and the Pygmies, they all been there for thousands of years before. The Zulus were there and all these other men were there. So they can easily say, turn up now, go to the government and say, listen, we are the original South Africans, we're the original Zimbabweans, and then now you Zulus and you Gazas, you guys are coming in here now. So like it's like a repetitive, oh, this is my land, this is my land. And I feel like that mentality it's regressive. Like as much as you want to have a black identity, like being black is like there's too many different types of phenotypes and peoples that are black. So you would have to always narrow it down to a tribe or even to a subgroup in a tribe. So I would say unity just in humans in general is like a key. You know what I'm saying? That's just my opinion. Not to say that I don't acknowledge that black people are oppressed, because we are oppressed. But then if we're going to get too complex about, you know, being secluded, it's going to get too deep, because then even within our seclusion, we're going to formulate other groups. It's just like how we always have done with tribes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I agree with that for sure, for sure. We'll come back again, like I said. But Betty, can I hear your voice?
Hi everyone, and to greet everyone in the chat and everyone scattered minds. Thank you. The question: did you say are Arabs? Do they belong in Africa?
Yeah.
I think I would say there's a difference between a native African and an African. The same way there's a difference in Australia. You have native Australians and Australians that have come in the last 200 years. From what I know, there's a debate on whether or not Arabic started in North Africa. Two linguists say it started in the Arabian Peninsula, and one says it started in the Horn of Africa. But I don't class, me personally, sorry, I don't class the Arabs of native Africans. I class them as Africans that have come in the last 2,000 years and mixed with native Africans. But they are there now. So one of the issues is in terms of, you know, the spread of Islam, Arab imperialism, and subjugating Black Africans and repressing their culture and just looking really down on it. So I think that is the issue. And also like stealing their achievements and claiming that it's their achievements. But also when they talk about being an Arab is like a cultural identity, like Latino. You can be a European Latino, you can be an African Latino, you can be an Asiatic one. Arab doesn't actually tell you the ethnic origin of the person. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Thanks for that, Betty. That's calm. I haven't heard from Yunes yet, and it looks like from your camera you're back again. So let me hear what you got to say quickly on this question. Nothing. You're just in there chilling. All right, cool. I think that's a troll. So who wants to come in next? I'll mute your mic quickly if you've got something to say.
Peace.
Go on, Byzantine.
All right. I really think the term Arab is misleading because Arabs utilize that term as far as an Arab-speaking people. So to be an Arab, you speak Arabic. Linguistically, from my investigations, a lot of the uh, languages that make up Arabic came out of the African diaspora. So I would say yes, Arab, anybody who identifies themselves as Arab is part of the African diaspora. Um, if you want to look at it that way, as far as the people who created a new Arabic language, and now they call themselves Arabs, which are mixed from invasion. So as far as the original, I would say yes, Arabs are Africanized, African centric people, because there are more than one type of Arabic language. They have a lot of African countries do speak a type of Arabic. It might not be that one specifically, but they do. So
Like
that's
Swahili.
my.
Okay, not sure you hear me. All right, come. Thanks for that input. Yeah, I'm gonna jump on that there quickly, and then I'll go to Jarina and then Mad, and then I'll come back to Shaka Ra, Tian, and Betty. So my position on it is, I believe you like North Arabs do now. I suppose no, it's difficult. If you're saying Arabs, I'd say no. I'd say Africans belong in Africa, and that Africa is for Africans. And I'd say if Arabs, therefore, live in Africa, identify with an African identity and African political philosophy, they then, therefore, I'd say belong in Africa. However, if they are distancing themselves from Africa, as a lot of Arabs do, as is, I suppose, culturally, I don't know, culturally, you see, I said the Arab side is seen as being culturally superior to Africans in several cases. I would say that obviously has no place in Africa. But I'd say, to respond to what Shakara said, and to be fair to what Betty said in regards to the Arabs being invaders, I think Betty said, I'm not sure actually, the Arabs coming in actually as invaders. I would agree that there definitely was an invasion, and a lot of those countries that now exist, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, etc., they all are the result of Arab conquests of those countries and of those peoples. However, I like Shakira said, even I think time does play a role here. I think the 1,000 years since that conquest, and if you even want to go back to the original conquest of North Africa, you're talking about Scipio Africanus, who conquers Carthage and so on. So you know the Romans conquered North Africa from back then. So the question is, who do you repatriate the land back to if we're going to take this land away from Arabs? We're going to say the Arabs no longer belong in that land. Who would you give that land back to? Who would belong there instead? And where would those Arabs go? So yeah, jump in. I was going to go to, I think, well, you're ready to talk, so go on, talk.
Yeah, just because you mentioned who should the land go to.
Yeah.
Well, this is how I see it, right? Because I've looked into my people, who are the Zulus and, you know, the Lemba, Kalanga, and I've thoroughly looked into where do the Sub-Saharan or the Bantu or the Negro people come from, because I would say we're the most predominant phenotype or peoples of Africa when you go beyond the Sahara Desert. Because when you think African, you think of a guy with nappy hair and a black guy, and you don't think of like Arab or Khoisan, or majority of the people would think of someone like us. So I was looking into the history of like where we came from, the migration, and surprisingly, it looks like we migrate into these lands, like into the lands of West Africa and South Africa. So like when we're naive, we haven't even been in those lands longer than like the Somalis and the Ethiopians, because these guys had kingdoms before the Timbuktu. Because even if you go to the Kemet as well, the Kushites, Abyssinia, these guys have been there. The Somalis and the Ethiopians and the Sudanese, they've been there longer than the Negroes, because the Negroes came in from, I would say they came in from the Levant or the Middle East. Because you mentioned something about Black Arabia, and the same thing is also shown if you look into the Israel regions and Palestine regions. There's a specific black peoples who are coming into Africa in 70 AD and building and establishing nations such as Timbuktu in West Africa. So we are not completely indigenous to that land as well, if you want to go deep. So this is why I don't get too angry about, oh, he shouldn't be here, they shouldn't be there. Because if you study where you come from, humans are nomadic. We travel, we move around. We don't stay in one place. You know what I'm saying? So That's what I gotta say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that. Yeah. So I haven't done enough research into it, but from what I know, one of the most ancient tribes, the Akan tribe, were in North Africa before Arabs. And what happened is they migrated south. Okay, and funny enough, there's actually some interesting facts, and I think it might be the Book of the Dead, but there was actually a Akan language in there. Believe it or not. So from what I was told, they migrated from the north of Africa, south, down obviously towards Egypt. And from this might just be a story, but from what I was told, they actually made up part of the Kemetic societies and then moved over west later on. Okay, so I'm not sure about what the last brother was saying, but Akans historically were in North Africa a long time ago. Okay, and then if we're talking about the Somalians and Ethiopians, from what I know from some of the stuff I've actually researched, there is actually a link between Kenya, Somalia, and some of those parts of Africa.
It's just me.
To the Swahilis, right? And ancient Swahili, and then before the Swahilis were the people of the Zand. You understand? So,
am I
cutting out? Yeah, can you hear me now?
There just then.
Yeah. So, I also what you said about the ancient people of
I need to get closer to when you get closer to your Wi-Fi source or something, because you keep cutting in and out, so I can't really hear anything you're saying properly. And I'm gonna go to Betty, and then we'll come back to you if you could try to sort that out, please.
I just wanted to talk, just sort of adding to what he said. If you look at the Sahara drying up about 5,000 years ago, between 3,000 years ago, there was a river that is supposed to have run from the Nile all the way into Nigeria via Lake Chad. If you look at Lake Chad about in the 60s was a lot bigger, and there are stories of the ancient Egyptians coming all the way down into the region that they now call Nigeria. So we have to be mindful of that. The Sahara hasn't always been there. It goes through dry and wet periods. And in the wet period, people would have lived there, and there were rivers that are no longer there. So that is how you can facilitate movement. But there's a book about it that Kalam was talking about. Can't quite remember the book, but maybe Kalam could tell us the book. He was talking about a book a couple of videos ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, there's definitely I heard that live where Kalam was talking about the book as well. And in the Sahara, it definitely was not always a desert. There's definitely communities living there. There's paintings and rock paintings from the communities who are living there of elephants and all types of animals, which showed that the land must have been green. There's a dry river and a dry lake right in the middle of the Sahara, which shows there was definitely water there for there to be a dry river, right? So we know that they was definitely able to move around the Sahara and move from up to down. My take is that the North Africans, like I say, what line? When do we draw the line? Then do you know what I mean? In terms of, if we're gonna kick the Arabs out, who do you give the land back to? Because just from here, listening to TN and then listening to Mad, you got a few different people who could have claim on North Africa already. A few different tribes or different cultural groups. As from the Akan, I know the Akan people have been around for a long time. My understanding was they were in the original Ghana Empire before the coming of Islam. And when Islam comes, the Akan people left that Ghana area where the Ghana Empire was to the current Ashanti land.
That's correct, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely been, and even before that, a lot of the people who moved actually to form the Ghana Empire had moved from what would have been the Nile areas and the Nile regions. So there's a lot of movement around Africa, as you're saying. But it's very difficult, like I say, to draw the line. For me, I think you could draw the line quite easily when it comes to white South Africans to a certain extent, because it's a lot more recent, and the history is right. It's very clear. It's very drawn out, and there's clearly people there. Do you know what I mean? There was the Khoisan people. You had the Hausa people. You had the Hausa people, and you had the Zulu people already there in South Africa. So they were all have clear land for where people or who the land goes back to from the white South Africans. Whereas within North Africa, there's many different claims and many different tribes who would have claim on that land. But I can see Yunus looks like he's back in the building. So I'm gonna shout out to Jarina. Jarina's here. Let me get Jarina because we haven't heard from you yet. What's your take? Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Had the Moors from Mali that were powerful and went to Europe and civilized Europe. And then again, it's like, what's the word? You know, they would rule and then they'll be defeated. So then during the Renaissance period, that was when the whole whitewashing of paintings and everything happened, and the rebirth of Europe happened. And and then that's when Africa went downhill, and they called it the Dark Continent, and then slavery happened. So just to sum up the history. So so us Africans, Black African people from Africa, we're going to see a rebirth of Africa again, back to its original position, because that's how kingdoms are. And it's a great time to be Black African, because the Renaissance had been literally going on until last year, really. When the North Africans would look down on Black Africans, you know, they would literally they'll say that they're not actually Black Africans, you know, they'll disassociate themselves from the continent to say that we're not like the other Black people, but we're, you know, but now due to Black African Pan-Africanism, it's a great time to be proud to be Black and African, and from, you know, so yeah, that's what I want to say. It's a bit long-winded, but I hope it made sense.
And sorry, can I talk about in terms of the haplogroups? Like they're talking about the Khoisan. Is it the Khoisan?
Yes.
Yeah. When you actually look at the haplogroups of the Y haplogroups, the oldest one is actually located in Mauritania, Senegal. It's not South Africa. Yeah. So the location of where life started is obviously up for debate. The second oldest is the one that's located in South Africa, but the oldest one is located in Mauritania, Senegal, when you look at the map.
They moved around, didn't they?
So people move around. It's debatable where life actually started in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's in Africa, it doesn't matter. They're the same people. They would be, you know, moving. When there's a famine, they would move better.
Why does it have to be in Africa?
Oh, or it could be, well, to be honest, the Middle East is Africa, though. Technically, the continent
Exactly.
of the Middle East is connected to Africa.
Because I'm saying it started in the Middle East.
Yeah, well, that's part of Africa. It's on the African tectonic plate. If you look at the planets, it's on the African tectonic plate. The Suez Canal was just broken off like 100 years ago. They actually put a canal there, but it's still Africa, technically. When Egyptians used to go and fight the Israelites, it was Africa. It was literally down the road for them.
But the Israelites are African.
Of course they are, 100%.
I think that's debatable, but
Yeah, calm, Shakara. What you gonna say? Jump in.
True the Israelites are not the topic of conversation. Let's not go into that today. Yeah? My thing is this. I have not been to Egypt, all right? But I have friends and family who have been and come back and report that the African people who are commonly referred to as the Nubians in Egypt are severely repressed. Yeah. You hear reports coming out of places like Mauritania and Algeria, about the repression. People seem to believe that the repression of Africans or Black people in Libya only started happening when Gaddafi was killed the other day. You know, and the reality is, I don't know how you kind of just you know, the man dies and all of a sudden all this repression just starts popping up from all over the place. No, it must have pre-existed before. Yeah. So my question is, well, for me, before even the issue of who do we give the land back to, because we can work that out however we want. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? The reality is that from all historical reports, that land that we call North Africa was once explicitly jet black.
Of course.
of jet black people. Where them there? Yeah, that me want to know. Where them there? Yeah, and if they're not there no more, yeah, is it because of the mass murder that took place as a result of constant Arab invasion? All right. The issue of the line, where we draw the line, we don't have to worry about that because them people, they already draw the line already. That's why there's a term called sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah, the term sub-Saharan Africa, the phrase that is designed specifically to separate the Arab North from the African South. The most of the Arab nations, and me and Captain Scarlett had this conversation a couple of weeks ago at Speaker's Corner, yeah, about the fact that most of these nations, they know who they are because they're members, politically speaking, of the Arab League. Yes, and they're far more active in the Arab League than they are in the African Union. Yeah, and so really and truly, it's like we're trying to hold on to people that really don't want nothing to do with us in the first place anyway. They only want access to our land because they know the wealth of the land. Yeah, they have no interest. What's it called? In being African or adopting an African way of life or an African identity. There's no, I don't see any mass inclination towards that agenda. So to me, we need to start fastening people's business and let's work on our own business. Yeah, the reality is they're not our people. Yeah, and where they go after they're not in Africa is it's not my business. What I know is Africa for the Africans, and that includes the Arabs. Their history in Africa is only not as clear because we haven't made enough of a point of highlighting it, yeah, and making it plain. We've gone through the work, yeah, of highlighting European invasion and colonization and so on and so forth. The reality is what I see in North Africa today is just straight colonization. It's not even neo-colonization. It's straight colonization. And so there are a lot of questions that we have to ask about that. What are the conditions of Africans in those nations?
Can I just say, in terms of, I think you're going to, I think it become a dangerous road because first and foremost, they are black native Africans in North Africa. If you go to the south, you'll see the taboo that are a black native
and the Berbers.
And no, one moment, Zulu. In South Libya, Gaddafi's son said Libya was half black in 2011. Yeah, so they are there. The same thing with Algeria, Morocco. They are black North Africans, but like you said, the oppression that is the problem. Yeah, but in terms of the oppression and stuff like that, we don't even treat ourselves. Black Africans don't even treat each other well. Why are we surprised if the mixed North Africans mistreat us? Yeah.
We're not united.
One moment. And the fact of the matter is, if you're going to go down the blood test, what the problem you've got is the people that descend from enslaved Africans in the Americas, they're also mixed. So at what point, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? Are you looking for 50%? Are you looking for 70%? Is it going to be the reverse brown paper bag test? Yeah, where if you're not mahogany, then you ain't classed as an African. Where are we going to draw the line?
All right, calm. Can I just take this moment to remind everyone that when somebody's speaking, try and keep your mics on mute. I don't mind you letting me know that you want to talk next by flashing your unmute mic and jumping in straight after the person starts speaking. I don't mind that, but try and show a little bit of respect while someone's speaking. I think I saw Mad unmute his mic there for a second, so I'm gonna go to Mad. If not, I'm gonna let Shakara respond or go to Jarino.
Yeah. So I understand where Betty's coming from. It's how you're gonna recognize, how you're gonna identify an African, and seeing it from that perspective. But me personally, the only Africans that I know who have willingly mixed with Arabs or Persians were the East Africans. That there was a period of time where the people of Zanj, okay, which then changed, which then developed into the Swahili tribe, okay, mixed with the people from Arabia, and it was because obviously that area was like a trading route, okay, and basically they started intermarrying. So from that collaboration, a lot of them won't know that now because unfortunately the writings of Arabs have stayed a lot longer than the writings of Swahili people. Even though there is a collaboration, there is a mixture in Swahili with Arab culture as well. So but it doesn't stand out enough about the history and the link between the Zanj people and the Swahilis. It doesn't stand. You have to really go into detail about that. But basically, but basically, what I'm trying to say is there was a known period where they were intermarrying and they were mixing as people. In regards to North Africa, that was a whole different situation. They literally, totally wiped out the Kan people that were there. And the funny thing is, they were actually originally known as the Berbers. The Kan people were actually known as the Berbers. And like an Arab, how the original Arabs were actually considered black people, if I'm not mistaken, in Yemen. It was like a particular mixed black tribe in Yemen. The name has actually been taken by you would obviously consider most of the people that are called Arabs now, you consider them as whites, similar to the Berber people as well.
Can I comment?
Go on.
Yeah, it's common what you said about the Swahili people. It's very interesting because if you look at the languages of South African languages, like the Bantu languages, and I've asked many of my elders, and when I've been to Zimbabwe and South Africa, I've asked them, and I've found out online that apparently Zulu, Xhosa, all these Shona, a lot of these languages, they stem from Swahili. The Swahili language is almost like the cornerstone to a lot of the Southern and Central African languages, and it's ironic how you find that Swahili is actually a mixture of an Arabic language and a native African language. So that shows that there's a heavy connection and tie to the so-called Arabs or Middle Easterns, like you guys would like to call them. So to separate them would be kind of impossible because we've almost amalgamated to a large extent. And when I say Arabs, I mean the original Arabs.
Yeah.
We've almost amalgamated with them to the point that we're almost the same people, if not their people.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I'll jump on that quickly. But we've got 2 new people in the room. Can I get the likes up as well, please, on the live stream? If you're watching, please get some more likes in there. We got a donation. I was going to see if there was a comment so I could read that as well. But shout out to you for donating. And if you're out there, please donate some more to Titans TV and to Kalam for hosting this conversation, allowing us to have more of these sorts of chats. Shakara, is your mic on mute?
No.
Cool. Yeah. So as I was saying, so shout out to Jesner and to Baptiste. I'll be coming to you in that order in a second. So my response to what you guys were saying there is I agree with quite a lot of it. However, like the last speaker was saying, I think for me, I see a lot of Arab history as being quite entwined with African history over the past 1,000 years or so, going back to the year 700. And of course, I would agree. Conquest was a big part of it, but I think people overplayed the hand that conquest played. I don't think that the Arab people were able to come in within the period of time and completely wipe out and obliterate all the pre-existing Northern Africans who were supposedly black who were there. I don't really believe that was the case. I think a lot of the Africans a lot of them moved, obviously, but a lot obviously stayed as well. And I think a lot of the Berber people, so when I was in Morocco, I met a guy who's black as me. He was fully 100% Moroccan. His mum's Moroccan, his dad's Moroccan. He said he's a Berber, He said he has links to the Tuareg people of the desert and so on. But he says he's a Berber and he's been a Moroccan the entire time. His name was Aziz. And so you do have these black people, and I'm not quite sure, completely convinced on the idea that the North Africans were all wiped out, or that the current North Africans who lived there have nothing to do with the North Africans of the past. I think there was a mixture. There was wars. There was people coming together, and getting back together after the wars or the fights. So I don't think it was that much of a big deal, to be fair. Sorry, I just lost one of the donations, so I didn't get to read it quickly enough. But brother Ashanti, I had to follow through Aki. GS happy thing. Okay, so I don't think that was really a comment. It was just a donation. I had to read it anyway. But that's my position on it. To be fair, I feel like the Arabs who currently have created countries there, what are we going to do? Are we going to go to war with them to get them out? It's really untenable, I think. And if you look at Pan-Africanism in 1960s, a lot of the Arab leaders were actually very radical and Pan-Africanists themselves. And I think we just need to get back to that stage where we have more Arab leaders claiming Pan-Africanism and getting involved within Pan-Africanism. And we should be convincing those types of people to embrace Pan-Africanism more, rather than this idea that we're going to be able to trump or get rid of North African Arabs out of that sort of area because let's be fair, it's like the all of North Africa now is dominated. But I do agree that when those people who are mistreating Africans, we should be very clear to call them out and say, you know, indigenous African people, Black African people deserve rights and etc. So let me come to Jesna quickly, if you're there. And I have kicked somebody else out for not speaking, so I will kick you out if you don't really contribute. So shout out Jesna. You're not going to respond. What about Banksy style? I know you had some stuff to say about this. Let me unmute you to make.
Hello?
Yeah, you're there. How you doing?
Yeah, excuse me. I'm good. I was wondering actually. I thought there was someone else before me. That's why I didn't want to unmute until they went. But I guess they're not talking. Well, this was
Hi.
actually. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Jesna. We'll come back.
Alright, no worries.
All right, cool.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I spoke to some chaps in Hyde Park on Sunday, and this was the conversation about Pan-African sort of educating Africans in order to basically create this Pan-African continent of unity, and that they would all work together. It was all this very utopian idea of Africa, and it was going to be just all marvelous. It's all Wakanda forever kind of stuff, and. And you know, they were going to build like circuit boards. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. They were going to build these circuit boards, which they were going to teach Africans in various different African nations to be able to then build their own printed circuit boards and develop their own computer systems and program those computer systems. They were going to build apps. There was this whole thing going on. How they were just going to, you know, as I said, Wakanda forever. But what I noticed was when I critiqued this utopian concept, and I said, you know, there is an issue with Africa, and it's not the continent, it's not the land. It's the problem with Africa. I mean, admittedly, I did say it quite maybe inflammatory, but I said the problem with Africa isn't Africa, it's Africans, where they've been tribal warfare and they've been killing each other for thousands of years, same as the Middle East. So how are they going to bridge these divides? Because there are some significant divides. These, you know, Africans haven't been walking around, you know, holding hands, singing Kumbaya for the last couple of thousand years. There's been some serious tribal wars. And when they said, oh, because obviously I look like a sort of white Caucasian male, so obviously immediately I was dismissed because I'm not brown enough. But they went, well, you know, where have you been in Africa? I said, well, I've been to Egypt, and they all laughed because as if Egypt doesn't count as Africa. And this was my moment of like, oh, okay, this isn't Africa they're after. This is just black people. This to me comes across as black people should unite because the white Africans above that north, you know, the above the Sahara line kind of thing doesn't count as Africa anymore. The Libyans, the Moroccans, the Egyptians, and you guys kind of been talking about this, so that was what I was interested in when these Pan-African groups are talking about uniting Africa. Are you guys really talking about the whole continent, or is this just a black movement? For now, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Banksy. I've been waiting for you. I knew you was coming in. Jesna, are you there? You ready?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
The brother, he touched on 2 points. Point number one, he talked about Black Panther and also sort of the issues that's going on in Africa. Black Panther, basically, you can watch it through two eyes. The first eye, you can watch it through, you know, obviously, it being a superhero movie. And you can watch it being, you know, you can watch it being, like, obviously, like, being a superhero movie. And then the second bit you can watch it is why did they like put that movie out, and who was it funded by, and who was it like you know, controlled by, because obviously we had a black director and the cast was black and everything was black. But you had Marvel, and Marvel is owned by Disney, and Disney has a long history of not including people that are black and whatnot. And I've heard that they wanted to change one of the characters the one with the princess and the frog into a mixed race person, if I'm correct. So you gotta look at through a lot more deeper than you actually think. And Wakanda actually means, I don't know if you're familiar with the Anunnaki. Am I there? Like, can you guys hear me? So the Anunnaki essentially is basically Wakanda for Africa. So the Africans called these people that came from different places and intermarried with women of you know, like of the earth and whatnot. They call them the Wakandans. So you got to look at it much more deeper, and you know the issues going on in Africa. It does not make sense to me that there's God knows how many, like 50 countries in Africa, or probably more, and not a single country in that continent, whether you want to call it sub-Saharan Africa or you want to include everything, is not functioning, is not working, is not as well known as you know, isn't a superpower and whatnot. And that's the thing that I want to talk about. And you know, it's a lot more deeper than you think. And then when you go to the, you know, the Arabs being Muslim, the Arabs not being Muslim, but you know, like just being African, there's a lot of different types of Arabs. When you think of Arab, you don't have to look at, you know, the modern day Arab that we see, the, you know, the sort of Asian, white sort of looking people. They're actually quite a border people, and you can say that they were darker skinned many hundreds of years ago. Even to this day, when you look at certain Yemenis from certain tribes in Yemen, they look dark skinned, they look Ethiopian, they look Somali, they do have a darker skin. So it's what I wanted to talk about, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's calm. Thanks for that contribution. And yeah, we'll touch on a couple of topics. Sorry, quickly. I just saw Ashanti Black's super chat. He donated $4.99, so thank you for that. In my humble opinion, Arabs don't belong in Africa. Ask one and see if they are. See what answer you get. So that's his position. So we'll come back to that. Let me see who else is about there. Who wants to talk next? Who wanted to respond? We've had, yeah, Shakara wants to come in. Betty, did you want to come in as well?
Yeah. Can I just say that I think what he's saying is really like silly and dumb, because it's not a black movement, because there's black people in Asia, in Papua New Guinea, in Australia. We're not trying to unite with them. So this idea that we're trying to create a black movement, no, we're trying to create an indigenous movement of Africa. We're not trying to unite with black Asians or Papua New Guinea. They're as dark as us. Some of them are even darker than me.
I hear you. And Shakara, you wanted to come in as well?
Just on the last point, I have come across quite a number of people that are putting forward the idea that we should be seeking to use. I mean, I met a Nigerian sister the other day who's doing work in India with the black people in India. Yeah. There's a sister over here, I forget her name, but she works a lot with the people from Papua New Guinea. And so yeah, that work does take place. I don't want to dismiss the works of people and what they're doing. That said, what's the guy's name? Banksy. Yeah, I'm very aware of what he's talking about, because I was the guy who shut him down at Speaker's Corner when he came in at the time. Yeah, I'm very aware, and that was because he actually came in. It's not that we dismissed him because he didn't look whatever. He actually announced his heritage when he came into the conversation, and said that he was going to inject reality, into the conversation, and so from that basis, when you see a circle full of African people talking about African development, it's just thoroughly disrespectful as a non-African to come in and chat about you're going to now inject, you're going to try to inject reality and try to educate us about ourselves. But outside of that, I mean, we come to expect that kind of, indignity from people. At the same time, what the whole point was the fact that we were there as Africans from different parts of the diaspora, and now what I was trying to get across is the fact that if you're not an African, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it shouldn't matter to us whether non-Africans think that we have the capacity to unite or not. What matters is if the Africans who are here, have that vision, and see that as a possibility, and therefore seek to make that happen. And that's all that was being said at the time. I welcomed the gentleman in, said to him, if you want to make a contribution, that's fine. Yeah, but let's be respectful. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, let's be respectful. Have some respect. Yeah, and if you don't have no respect, then you're gonna get run. And I have make no apology for that. What's it called? The reality is, yeah. Now on this Arab issue, we have to really look at. Again, so I didn't actually say that there are no black people in North Africa. What I said was that the black people who are there, who once were the majority, are now the minority and are oppressed. Yeah. So we're talking about real dynamics. We're not talking about nations across North Africa of Arab majority, yeah, who are, you know, adopting an African identity. We're not even just talking about masses of mixes. Yeah, a lot of these people are not necessarily mixed with anything African. Okay, we find that more in East Africa. Yeah, then now we have also that this is where it gets complicated, the dichotomy of people who are actually African, but because of Arabic supremacy identify as Arabic. Yes, there are wars being fought on the continent right about now because of these designations and distinctions. So I don't claim that everything across the continent, as far as the Arab issue is concerned, is simple. There are some complexities. There are some simplicities as well, though, and I would regard that North Africa is a much more simple case. Like I said, there are Africans there who will tell you, if we wanted to hear them and speak to them and put them on shows like this and radio shows and them kind of things there, who will tell you about the oppression in many North African nations.
Thanks for that. I'll come back to Banksy so you can respond. But quickly before I do that, I think I said that right. Hopefully I said that right. Shout out to you for the donation. Bless. The main focus of Pan-Africanism is more worthwhile when you discuss it specifically among our Black, African, Caribbean, Black people, not unity for fake. No, yes, not. Anyway, you take Arabs. So yeah, shout out to you for the super chat and the money. And if you want to get your chat seen, super chat is a way to do it. So hit that donation button and do a super chat. Also, if you want me to see your chat, you can also just at Scattered Minds and it should highlight for me. But like I say, the chat's moving fast and I don't catch everyone and I can't read every single message. So super chat is probably a more sure, guaranteed way to get through. But shout out to everyone in the chat room and I will try and read your comments out if they come up. But yeah, so Starina, do you want to take it away, please? Jarina?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. I just wanted to talk about the negative propaganda against Africa for the past, how many decades now? I'd say 3 decades. The anti-African agenda. They only associated our history with slavery. Whenever they see Black people in the Middle East, they say, oh, they're descendant of slaves, when that's not true. They're the actual indigenous people of the Middle East, such as the Yemenis that are there. So yeah, there was a bunch of lies, like a world media lie about African people, to a point where the African diaspora in the Caribbean and Americans were ashamed to be African and associated with our wonderful continent. So as someone who's African and from, you know, Ethiopia, where the biggest aid agenda was done on my country and our people were seen as beggars. So yeah, I've had 30 years of this horrible aid thing that's been going on. And, you know, Ethiopia is actually growing now. It's got a growing economy and it's going to be the next superpower after Nigeria. So, and things are changing. What I want to say is that a lot of Africans feel angry about that. The reason why they put that nasty propaganda was so that Africans don't unite. You know, that was the whole point. But now, obviously, we Africans, we started from scratch and we wanted to build pride about our continent. And now that we're talking about it and you know, your forum here is a great chance for people to talk about Africa and how we should all unite. And it just makes, I feel like a lot of people feel very uneasy about it, because this is something that they've tried to stop for decades, and you know, it's not going to work anymore, because I honestly believe it is Africa's time. So yeah, that's what I want to say.
Awesome, thanks. I believe it's Africa's time too, and Africa United, and good on that information about Ethiopia. It is a very fast-growing economy, and actually, I think we're seeing a lot of encouraging signs towards Pan-Africanism actually becoming somewhat of a reality in the unification between, well, not quite unification, but the growing relations between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which 5 years ago people might have seen said wasn't going to happen. And I do talk to brothers at the park who say, Somali brothers at the park who are like, I'm down for Pan-Africanism, but we will never unite with Ethiopia. Well, once Eritreans were saying that, so we could see that people are willing to unite eventually, and it's just about unity. Once Scotland want to be part of the Great Britain, right? So
that's true. And also the false propaganda that people in the Horn are mixed, and that's complete nonsense. That's lies, because the people of the Horn and Ethiopia would have looked the same in the Middle East. They would be the same people. And there's this lie that, they're mixed with Arabs. And again, the original Arabs were black Africans, very black, and they look like every other African on the continent. So, there's so much lies and gossip, and, we as Africans need to ignore it.
So, do you mind if I chime in there?
I've gone mad, but I need to come to Banksy though.
Okay, yeah, just quickly. Yeah. I'm so sorry about it, but all I'll say to you is do your history on the Zanj people and the Swahilis. You will see there was a period where unfortunately to say, and it might not be, it is where it is. It's not a bad thing. There was intermixing going on. So I'm just saying, do your history on the Swahili people, and do your research, and you'll see there was a period.
But they were black. They were black people.
They were black, but then they mixed with the
but they are black. They're still African. So this thing that it's pale Arabs that they've been mixing with, that's not true. The pale Arabs that are in the Middle East come from Asia and Europe. And Genghis Khan people, Genghis Khan came and literally had his army on that region. So again, this whole mix thing, I see a lot on blogs on YouTube, and again, that's false, because everyone, Africans are very varied. They don't all have one look, but if you check their DNA, they'll have the same DNA as someone from West Africa. So it's just a very varied. There's different shades of black people. That's what I want to say.
I think there's a problem as well. Can I ask the question?
Let me get some order in there. I'll come back to that. But I just
sorry, one moment, Scotty, man. There's someone in the comment section that's asking, and I think it relates to the question.
Sorry. So M.A. Brown, I'm gonna come to you after Banksy straight away. Yeah. Sorry, just hold tight a little longer. So Banksy, you can just finally respond now to Sakura, and then we'll go to M.A.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, actually, I'm glad that Shakara is actually in this chat, because he actually remembers the interaction then, and the thing was, when I said injecting reality, I'll be honest, I didn't mean to be like rude about it, but when I was standing there and listening to this, and I'm thinking, again, it just kept bringing me to this, like, this is a delusional ideas of what things could be. I don't think this is grounded. You see, the reason I wanted the way I said what I said, I want to know your solutions, like real hard grafted down to earth solutions, because I'm hoping that your solutions will ultimately can be translated or reflected in the Middle East, because the Middle East, although, that day we talked about how, okay, fair enough, Persia or Iran wasn't colonized, but when you talked about an economical colonial setup, that even though, sorry, I've got someone else showing up on my screen, but okay, even though there wasn't an economical a physical colonization of the Middle East, there was definitely an economical colonization that America used its system of taking out democratic leaders and putting in puppet governments, and then economically controlling that system and that region. This is what has happened. So we may not have been physically colonized like African nations, but we were definitely economically colonized. And I want genuine solutions, that if the solutions you have for Africa, for the continent of Africa, could potentially be replicated in the Middle East, although we have different problems and slightly different issues, I think some of it can be transferred over. And that's why when this kumbaya. Oh, it's going to be this amazing continent which will, develop cloning technology and spacecrafts. It just rang too much of Hollywood to me than reality. And it just like, look, you're going to have to start with people wanting to kill each other. That's the part that I want to actually address. That's the part that I'm genuinely interested in, is how do you stop people from wanting to kill each other? Because they're doing it in Africa, they're doing it in the Middle East, in their scores. We're talking hundreds of thousands of lives a year, and I don't see a light at the end of this tunnel. All I see is death and destruction. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Cool. Because we've been on the live for a little while now. I do want to start moving, like you're saying, towards answers and solutions. So I don't want to. So if you guys could try and wrap your answers up a bit quicker, because we do have quite a big panel, and I want to make sure everyone else does get in and gets a chance to discuss. But I know M.A. Brown had a discussion or a question that they wanted to ask. So if you want to unmute your mic and jump in now, ask away. If not, I do have some questions from you, I believe, that I could ask on your behalf.
Yo, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, my question really is a bit of a departure from what you men are talking about. But when we talk about Africa, yeah, one of the things that concerns me for the future is all the European conventions that are being instituted in Africa at the moment. So, like, it begins really outside of Africa. So we see Black people around the world really adopting kind of capitalist ideologies and propagating that in their neighborhoods, in their own communities. You have the street capitalism that exists in some of the more deprived areas of the Black community, and you have in this country you have a long-standing now influence of Black American culture, which is really kind of stained with white capitalist ideologies, and then you see the Hollywood model being replicated in Nollywood. And you just see a whole bunch of really, insidious, viral, methodologies being instituted in Africa. I remember D. Nokai tagging me in this video of this architect. I don't know what country it was. I think it might have been Ghana. And there's this architect, and he's sitting talking about his project and where he's created his project of what is it, like condominiums. So he's created these condominiums. He studied architecture in Austria or somewhere like that, and he's got these apartments, yeah, and these apartments are going for like, I don't know, 200 grand or something like that. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but they're not affordable, right? And it's all really sterilized environments that don't look like Africa, or the Africa that I am expecting to see, right?
Yeah.
What I see is and then if you couple that with what the Chinese are doing now in Africa, and that, like, my concern at the moment is not, and it isn't really how we're going to economically better ourselves as African people, although that is the main thing. But what my concern is how that is going to come about. How is that going to look? What is that going to entail? What are we taking from Europe? What are we going to be taking from Europe and other places in the world and bringing into Africa? And whether those things that we do bring in are to the betterment or the detriment of the continent. So that's my concern.
I hear that. So it's a good question, a good conversation to have in general. I do have the similar concerns. But like you said, a little bit off topic in terms of talking about the Arab question. I do want to try and get an answer to that today, or come to some solution or some sort of I don't know, some agreement between the panel if possible. And if not, I'm just going to sum up with my opinion anyway. But I'm going to jump in. Whoever wants to jump in next can jump in next, other than Shakara, because I'm going to come to you, Shakara. Just hold tight. Anyone?
I could jump in. I just want to address the questions in the comments, because people have been asking. Christian Malik wants to know if anyone actually been to Africa on the panel. And,
okay.
And another thing he wants to know, the other question someone else asked in terms of mixed Africans. So if we're saying that the Arabs are not Africans, then some of them he reached 50% native African blood. What about people like Akala, who are 50% and it's got a white mother? So there's a sort of a hypocrisy in it. So that's what they want to know. Who are you classing as an African if they're mixed?
100. Cool. So I've been to Africa, yes. And would I class a mixed person as African? Yes, I would as well. Like I say, my position on the North African question is I would include North Africans who self-identify and are happy to promote and to join in with a Pan-African indigenous promoting the rights of indigenous Africans within Africa and them taking ownership of Africa. If they have that standpoint, then I'm down with it. If they have a different type of viewpoint or worldview, I'm not down with it. But anyone else, have you been to Africa, and how do you class mixed race people in that case?
Hi, can I speak?
Yes, please.
Basically, what I want to say is I don't want to be offensive or anything, but I don't get like 50%, 100%, that kind of percentage of where you want to be African. I think I mentioned before that being African isn't only just one genetic group of people. It's a group of different people, and people are allowed to change, are allowed to evolve, but it's just I get like there's a massive stigma of just being like dark skin and being, if you want to say all people that are dark skin, the African, well, you just need to go look around all the world and all that kind of stuff. But what I want to say is when you're looking around the world and then the people who are Filipino, for example, were dark skin, but after time, you know, they've gotten lighter skin. Is that because of the colonial masters at that time? I know there were like issues with the Spanish and whatnot, but were they instilled by them? That's probably so. But you know what I mean? It's all about you gotta look at the people, look at their various different genetic stuff. You've got to look at culture, you got to look at language, you got to look at the history. Do you know what I mean? And I think one of the brothers, I can't remember his name, but he said that Somali people and Ethiopians are mixed. I want to say this, yeah, because I'm Somali, right? No coincidence. And basically, if we were like mixed in with Asian and white people, like that Ethiopian girl said, I think we would definitely look Arab, but we're not. We're like dark skin, and just because somebody has different facial features doesn't mean you're not African enough. Do you know what I mean? And even though I live here in the UK, I still get treated like I'm somebody from anywhere in Africa, like sub-Saharan Africa, quotation marks. I don't know what that means, but you know what I mean? Like the struggle is real. Like it baffles my mind. And you know the thing about Somalia and Ethiopia, Somalia and Ethiopia, we can't be like friends. Do you know what I mean? It's like the English and the French, but we need time, and you need time to heal. Time's like a really good healer. And I don't want to ramble for too long, but you know what I mean? It's the colonizers, when they came to Africa, they digged a hole so deep, and they made the situation so deep that everybody just latches onto it. And if you want to know how people that are black living in North Africa, how they're treated, I think a best documentary, I don't know if you guys heard of it, but if you go on how people in Tunisia, the black people living in Tunisia, go on Al Jazeera and just watch, like it's like a 30 or 20-minute documentary of how they treat black people in Tunisia. And there are people that are black in North Africa, and it's just disgusting, and it baffles my mind that people that are human beings that are treated like this. And you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, that's all I wanted to say for this section.
Oh, you forgot to answer whether you've been to Africa. That was the next
I've been
question.
to Africa, yeah. I'm from Somalia. I went to Egypt. I went to Ethiopia. I went to Somalia. Best time of my life.
All right, cool. Thank you for that one. All right, cool. Shout out to Ron for your wife for your donation. 50%, 75%, 12%. It's a joke thing. This isn't Dragon Ball Z. I hear you, bro. Sometimes I wish it was Dragon Ball Z though. But yeah, no, I mean the percentage thing I don't really get, but I would say, you know, I don't really care about the percentage thing. I'd say, you know, you're African it's a self-identifying thing, and as well as a genetic thing. Do you know what I mean? But I'll come back to my opinion afterwards, because we have to ask other people on the panel, and I'm going to come to Shakara last with the question. But we'll go to TN. Have you been to Africa, and what's your take on mixed race people?
To answer your first question, I was born in Zimbabwe. I visited there twice.
Yeah.
I've been to where else have I been to? Kenya. But like during the airport on the way to Zimbabwe, so I don't know if you class that as being there. But in terms of mixed race people, yeah, if you're, see, the thing is, I used to think it's by the father. If your father, you are what your father is, but the biology actually shows that, you know, you carry a lot of DNA from the mother's side. But regardless of the DNA, like you guys were saying, it's the character. As being African, like there's a certain common culture, and it's like we always value human. We have like a high respect for human values. So it's almost like we have our own culture as a collective. And I think if you've adopted that culture, you're African, regardless of your DNA. But yeah, that's what I think personally.
I agree with you. Betty, can I come to you next, or do you want to go later?
Oh, no, I can come. For the people, I've been to Egypt and Nigeria. In terms of who, whether I consider a mixed African, I consider anyone who's born in Africa, raised in Africa, an African. If you're mixed, then and your bloodline goes back to Euro-Asia, I consider you part native African. I think there's a clear distinction between being a native African and being an African. Same thing in Australia. You got Australians, and then you get Aborigines. So that's how I see it. And just like Scattered Minds say, if you class yourself as an African and you want to contribute to the development of Africa, then yeah, I see you as an African. But there are different types of Africans, like African Caribbeans, Africans, Australians, all over the place.
100%, yeah, definitely. It breaks down into lots of different tribes and so on. So yeah, it's a big category to be within, to call yourself African. It's about understanding that you don't have the monopoly on all of African culture, because there's many. And but anyway, let me come to Mad with that question. Same question. Have you been to Africa?
Yeah, I've been to Africa. I went to Ghana. Been there a couple times.
Yeah.
And my perspective on mixed race people, are they African or are they black as well? You can I suppose you can compress both those sayings into the same sentence. I would personally say it depends who they're having children with. Simple as that. Right, and that might be extreme, but for me, African people, in order to continue on our kind of lineage, and to make sure that we are putting and rebuilding our communities and actually putting ourselves first, as far as I'm concerned, if you're trying to better your community, you're not going to be having children outside of your Africanness. If anything, you're going to try to attach yourself to it again. So I mean, that might sound really ignorant, but I actually think that it actually says a lot who you're having children with, in my personal opinion, if you're a mixed race person. So if you're then, and it's not just that, because if as a mixed race person has a child with a black person, they then know what it's like to be black. They can see it through their child's experience. You understand? Because they've always got that attachment to whiteness. So that makes them different.
I hear you. Well, so Carlo, you wouldn't consider him? You'd say, what? He's not black.
Well, there are certain people that I would actually say don't need to go through that process, because they've actually shown it through their experience. They've actually shown it through their works. They've actually, made sure that they're actually advancing the black community. So someone like a Carlo wouldn't need to qualify for that type of perspective.
I hear you. So many people have to go through a qualification process.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, throughout our history, yeah, the mixed race person has actually done a lot of damage to Africans, fam. Let's not get it twisted.
I would say the African person has done a lot of damage to Africans, but I'm not going to get into this back and forth.
No, I'm not anti anything, but I'm just saying they've been used against us. They've been used against. But do you know what I'm trying to say? So, like, for me, that's just my personal opinion.
Now, I hear you. Now, because it's an interesting debate, but I wanted to get our people in. So, Jarina, sorry, you've been already. Jarina. All right, no, Jarina.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Have you been to Africa? Have I asked you this?
Yes, I've been to Africa. Yes.
Tell me if you want to know now. I don't even know if I asked this last.
I have, yeah. Been to Kenya. I've been to Ethiopia. Where else have I been?
And what do you consider mixed race people?
Well, I don't consider. Well, it depends, because historically, mixed race people have had the advantage of being closer to white and being given certain privileges, and they've enjoyed those privileges, and so their heart, they've waved the mixed race flag proudly, and enjoyed colorism in terms of benefiting from colorism and being the acceptable face of blackness. So it depends if they are not those kind of mixed race people, but mixed race people that understand colorism and how mixed race people have been used as a tool in the past to destroy and keep down the black communities of the world. If they can understand that, then yeah, they can be African. But I think, my personal opinion, a lot of them are not pro-black. So that's my opinion.
Don't you think that kind of qualification process should happen to all black people, not just mixed race people? Because black people have been used to bring down black people in the past as well.
They need some help in awakening themselves, and because at the end of the day, they are victims of mass propaganda and anti-blackness. So do you blame them that they hate themselves? And a lot of these, I'm sad to say, a lot of these mixed race people that have been created were a reason of self-hate and trying to make their lives a lot better through their children. So there is a lot of work that's needed in the black community. So those topics need to be discussed.
Sorry to interrupt you. You definitely don't shy away from controversy. I think those are topics that...
No, things need to be said. I don't see why we should hold our tongue because other people are listening.
I hear you. I'm going to come to Shakara because I've had him waiting for time. But before Shakara, I just want to ask Banksy, because I think the chat's asking. Banksy, how many times have you been to Africa? Where in Africa have you been? What do you think about mixed race people? I know he's been Egypt. I'm trying to find out anywhere else, though. No. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I said at the beginning, yeah, I mean, I went to Egypt, but it seems weird that some people kind of suggested on the day that maybe that's not really Africa. I guess if I'm not crawling out of the Serengeti with a zebra on my back, maybe I haven't been to Africa. I don't know, but I figured Egypt was good enough. But I want to go to other parts of Africa. It's just convenience time. I'll be absolutely honest with you though. If I've been to a fair few different places, but some of it I don't consider actually being to those countries in the way that you should be. Like, I've been to what's it called? Let's say, yes, Sweden. I went to Sweden once. I walked around, I took photos, and I went to a museum and the IKEA and the IKEA store. That's not being in Sweden. That's not really. That's tourists. Whilst the time I spent in Brazil, I was with Brazilians. I was amongst them. I was living alongside them. I saw their homeless people at night sleeping rows and rows on the street. That to me felt like I was more like I'd been to Brazil, not just some tourist trap.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't consider the places that you go and take a few photos and post a few pics on your Facebook is really being there. Being there is if you've actually spent time in the dirt, in the mud, and then you live with the people and you live alongside them the way you eat the way they eat, you live the way they live, you sleep the way they sleep. That to me is when you've been there. Other than that, you just been a tourist.
Well, Banksy, sorry, I gotta speed you up because, like I say, the show is it's reaching almost the 2-hour mark, so I'm trying to get some.
Sorry, I'm done.
Your answers to be quicker. Everybody, not just yours. Everyone, just come up with some quick, snappy answers, please, and let's try and keep the conversation flowing. The second question was, what is your take on mixed race people? Are they still black? Are they still African? How do you interpret that, Banksy?
Well, this is the weird thing. Like, can a Moroccan call themselves like in America, African Americans call themselves African Americans? Can a Moroccan call themselves that? So if a Moroccan can call himself an African, a mixed race person should have that identification. But I don't know how many stages do you have to be removed from a particular place to no longer be part of that place? How many generations down the road do you have to be born? How many times your dad and your uncle and your aunties have to be white and black for you to no longer be? I honestly don't know. I mean, I think there are some English black people who are not African, and there are some white people who are definitely African, because South African whites, I consider them far more African than I consider a guy who's been born, a black guy who's been born in, Essex for the last 20 generations. I just don't know. Is your skin color makes you part of that continent, or does the fact that you identify at your core with that continent? It's where do you draw the line?
Thank you, Banksy. Yeah, no, I hear that. And like I say to everybody, please, can we try and get some snappy and some quick answers going forth? We're coming up towards the end of the show. And I do want to try and narrow the conversation down a bit towards sticking to this conversation and actually getting to some solutions. I'm going to mute you. If you've got something to say, like I say, you got to be quick for me to call you in. If you've got something to say, jump in. Don't try and overtalk or overpower them. And if you do that, I'm going to be quick on the mute button and I'm going to be quick on the eject button, because if I can get this group down to a smaller size, it might be a little bit more manageable. So show some respect to people talking, but still jump in when you're ready to jump in and you've got something to say, and let's try and get the conversation flowing and moving. And like I say, no long rants, going on for too long, please. And run for your wife. I see your super chat. Yo, I beg you put your thing on mute. Just anyway. Yo, and run for your wife. I've seen your super chat. I am gonna respond. I'm gonna ask that question, but that's a nice summary question that I want to wrap up with. So I'm gonna hold it for then. Please forgive me for that, but jump in with any other questions you have. So yeah, Shakara, respond, and then after this, everyone quickly, but obviously respectfully.
What's this? The questions about whether I've been to Africa and everything there.
Yeah, and respond to Banksy's comments.
Oh, yeah.
Go quick.
Yeah. I don't really have much to say to Banksy, to be honest with you. There is an extent to which I don't really even consider the opinions of non-Africans who want to wax lyrical about African issues. He's entitled to his opinion, and he's entitled to his free speech, and I'm entitled to regard it or disregard it as the case may be. Like I said, a non-African's opinion of whether Africans can unite and tribal wars in Africa really means nothing to me. As far as I'm concerned, what matters is whether African people actually believe this propaganda or not, and to whatever extent it's true, what healing can we create out of it? Have I been to Africa? Yes, I've been to Africa. I've been to Ghana. And considering one thing that I do consider that Banksy said that is correct is in terms of living with the people, and I was able to do that in Ghana. So yeah, I give thanks for that experience there. There are many other African nations that I wish to visit, as well as nations of predominantly Africans in the Caribbean as well, such as Haiti and then places there. Do I consider mixed race people black? Yes. I think that the major criteria coming up in Pan-African organizations was that once you have one full African parent, then you're considered black. That was a general, modus operandi of most organizations. And so, yeah, I consider mixed race people to be black.
Not true, yeah. But like I said, would they have two mixed race parents? Would they be dead?
I consider that to be black. Yeah. The reality is because on this Arab thing, yeah, and there's a lot of things that man could respond to, but I think we really have to look at, and I could have done this today, but I didn't want to be too long-winded, but how these North African nations operate politically and culturally, yeah, that would tell us everything that we need to know, yeah. And I could use the example of Gaddafi, because he is the one who is championed the most in terms of Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists. And many of his moves, the political moves in Africa, were very duplicitous, to say the very least. And he was the best, yeah, among these Arab nations, if that makes sense. He was the best representing those Arab nations. So, like, I've studied this thing enough to document some of the political machinations of these people, yeah, and they're just not for us. I think we need to, be realistic in terms of what these people have actually represented and manifested on the continent, and whether it is in our best interest or not.
Calm. Who's jumping in next?
No one's got anything to say?
No one's got anything to say?
I can say something in relation to Gaddafi and to reiterate what the brother said. Is it Shaka? Yeah, what he said in terms of Gaddafi, I've read a lot of Gaddafi and I'm reading his book right now. And in terms of him being pan-Arab first, and then when he could not unite the Arabs, he then turned to be pan-African. But we still have to thank brother Gaddafi for what he did in terms of facilitating the African Union, paying for the African satellites that facilitate me being able to video call my relatives in Africa. So we can say we got to thank brother Gaddafi and Algeria, who put up most of the money for the African satellites. Yeah, of course. And he was one of the only Arab leaders that apologized for the Arab slave trade. Did he make mistakes? Yeah. We all made mistakes. There's no one that did make mistakes. But Scattered Minds said, we have full-blooded Africans who are not for Africa, who have more native African blood and not for Africa. There are some mixed Africans who are more for Africa than the ones that are full-blooded. So we've got to be careful with this purity test and stuff like that. But Gaddafi made a lot of good things, but he made a lot of mistakes in terms of oppressing the native African populations in terms of the taboo and also of the Berbers, not allowing them to speak their native languages, that allowed those people to overthrow him. Yeah, they were minorities. That's what he did. That's what angered the people in his country, and also he was overthrown as well by the Middle East.
Yeah,
the leaders in the Middle East also,
yeah,
as well as free leaders in Africa.
Yes, for sure.
Yo, can I jump in?
Please do, quickly.
Yeah, man. One thing I would say is that African nations first need to decide what they want to be in it, because we're talking about Africa, the continent, but the nations themselves need to take a position on what they are trying to be. Because if you have one African nation that's, yeah, we're pro Africa or whatever, and you have another nation that's happy to kind of do X, Y, and Z with China or whatever, then you're going to have a conflict of interest. And to be honest, like, I've never been to Africa, innit? I was born here. My dad was born in Jamaica. My mom was born in Dominica, right? And as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of, to me, it's a question of blackness, which I don't believe is exactly the same thing as being African, because I believe that all black people are African, but I don't think all Africans know that they're black and have maybe not experienced what it's like to be black. As you know, there's some Somali people and some Eritreans and Ethiopians who don't claim to be black, and it's no slight on them. It's just because they haven't experienced that yet. So as far as I'm concerned, there's something to be contributed by the diaspora in first warning and then educating people from the continent about what blackness is, right? Because actually the economic situation on the continent is due to blackness. And if people on the continent don't know that blackness even exists, then they're going to fall for the same trap over and over again. This is why you see China in wherever the hell they are, Nigeria. Yeah, there isn't a single black nation that is dumb enough to who identifies as black, who is dumb enough to go and do a move like that. Do you know what I mean? Maybe Jamaica will do it because they're idiots still. But yeah, to me, it's like there's a few questions that need to be asked first. Like the thing about Akala and about mixed race people, to me, there's so many nuances about this issue of whiteness within blackness, or a mixed race person who's been raised in a white family. You know, I had a previous partner who was half Jamaican Cuban, half Irish. Yeah, and it took me a long time to that a lot of the stuff she was saying was coming from her white mind. Yeah, because she was so pro-black. Yeah, but if you just take it as on face value, yeah, she's saying all the right things. She wants to connect with Cuba. She wants to do this, that, and the other. If you take it on face value, you're gonna miss a lot of shit, and that's where the infiltration and the corruption and the virus can enter. And it can enter with darker skinned people too. But for me, the education is a lot more straightforward. With mixed race people, like I know mixed race people who are committed to excavating their own being, you know, by clocking the whiteness in their sentences or in their thinking. And to me, I think once African nations can decide what they want to be individually and then collectively, with the help of the black diaspora around the world, yeah, then we can come to an understanding of who is going to be kind of accepted into the African family, and who maybe needs to be ejected, because I can see that happening as well.
Yeah, cool. Bless for that. Like I said, and just to come back to you quickly before I move on, what is it that you want? Because you went for a little long explanation there, but what about you? What's your position, and what is it you want for Africa, and not just what Africans want? Because we can't talk for what all Africans want. We could talk from your perspective of what you want.
Me personally, like I said, I was born here. You know, I regard myself as black, right? And what I want for Africa is I want Africa to have an autonomy over their future that requires them not to ignore the plight of of black people or black Africans around the world, to basically incorporate the thinking of those outside of the continent into the continent. And I think that's hard for some nations to do. I don't believe that they think that they're in as much trouble as they are in. And from where I'm sitting, yeah, I can see bare trouble right now and lying ahead. So I can't say much more than that. I think my subjective contribution is going to be that. So that's all I can really say.
Calm, that's cool. Who wants to jump in next quickly?
Guys, can I just get... Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, just quickly before we jump in, mate. So basically, what I want to say is, well, one of the things we have to realize is that there is still a colonialistic grip on Africa and African people all around the world. Like, do you know, they don't teach about Africa and the slave trade and Africanism in the Caribbean. They don't do it. Like, and part of the reasons why they do that is the case is because of the things that were drawn up in the independence of these countries. So basically, when the Europeans said, okay, you're going to be independent now, they gave guidelines to Africa on what they cannot teach and what they cannot implement into the systems, so that the African people do not rise up, unite, and go against Europeans, right? And one of the things that they had to introduce into a lot of these countries, my country, was Christianity. Christianity was one of the things that basically dociled the people in Ghana and literally kept them under the spell of the Europeans. And if you look at, obviously, you know, white Jesus Christ up in Ghana, that type of thing there is something that can obviously, you know, make Africans, you know, see white people as, you know, higher beings and less and obviously have less value for themselves. So what we have to look at is the systems in place. Now, you have to obviously attack a system with a system. You understand? There's no way you can take on a system as individuals, because it will destroy you. So naturally, what you have to do is work out what is in the system poisoning you in the first place. Now, we know, obviously, religion was the one that really controlled us. But generally now we know that, obviously, there's, you know, I think it's a circularization. So it's now media that is controlling us. It's now media that is basically giving us our culture that was taken away from us through slavery. So what do? We separate ourselves from the media. We monetize the media. We don't accept any media that comes from other races, okay, unless it's gone through a filter system of our own, you know, cultures and our own value system, norms and values. And then what you start to do is you start to look at all the poison that's we're being fed. Then you base a system around that to protect yourself, and then from there you build systems that can basically unite us. But until we start protecting ourselves from the poison that is out there, that's been implemented into our cultures, into our countries, there's no way we can actually, you know, unite with each other and take on, you know, the system which is, you know, white supremacy.
Calm, yeah, I agree with that for sure. Let me anyone else want to jump in? Oh yeah, Banksy.
I just wanted to very quickly say, first of all, Shakara, I actually genuinely respect your ideas and your thoughts, and I wish I could have a longer conversation with you, perhaps maybe in the Discord of Titans Discord or something at a later stage, because I know that it seems as if I've come across as hostile or somehow abrasive to your ideas. but I genuinely am interested in the things you have to say. So I do respect your ideas and your mind on these matters. So that's what I wanted to first of all lay out. But there was the other point that I noticed was MA mentioned that his parents were both born in Caribbean, and he himself has never been to Africa, and yet it seems so easily dismissive, especially when you see it in the text in the chat room here, that anyone, when I mention Moroccans, when I mention Libyans, when I mention white South Africans, they are not Africans. It's so easily dismissed. And yet MA, whose parents weren't born in Africa, he himself has never been to Africa, is considered more African than a Libyan. How this is why at the beginning I said, is this a black movement or is this an African movement?
Biology,
because I think
mate.
there is a difference. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, respond.
Yeah, I just want to first of all say that we've got to be careful with this identification thing. As I said to you the other day, Captain Scarlet, the reality is when it comes to this identity, there are white people in Zimbabwe and South Africa right now who would tell you that they're African. Yeah, and they will tell you that I saw in Jamaica that the new ambassador for South Africa in Jamaica is an Indian who went there and told the black people in Jamaica that he's more African than them because in Banagura, South Africa. Yeah, and I thought that was like, no, I mean, I know not everyone's like me, but I'd run a boy for saying that to me. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because that's deep, right? I don't think that as African people we should we are, you know, duty bound, to hold these insults and entertain them, which is why I've dealt with Banksy the way I have dealt with him, because you can't come on a chat like this and talk about coming out of Serengeti with zebra skin on your back here and then kind of statements there. I expect to be taken seriously. I don't take you seriously when you come with them way there, right? But my point is that these Europeans in South Africa and Zimbabwe and other places in Southern Africa are claiming indigenous land rights based upon the legacy of their invader ancestors. Yeah, and I'm just failing to see how it's any different to the Arabs in North Africa or any other part of Africa claiming indigenous land rights on the back of their invader ancestors. Yeah, that is a reality, and it's a political play on the part of the Europeans in South Africa. Watch any debate, on land rights in South Africa and Zimbabwe today, and you will see these Europeans playing these political games, and calling themselves African, when before apartheid went down and them kind of things there, they weren't calling themselves African like that. You know what I'm saying? So we have to be very, very mindful of these political games. There's a purpose and a reason why the ancestors of our movements identified and adopted the designation of African as a nationality, as a term of nationhood. Yeah. And in terms of being true to that, because there's a reason for it, in terms of what that means politically, in terms of what that means culturally, in terms of what that means economically, we have to understand that, yes, and not squander the legacy of our ancestors by just allowing everybody into the identification. Like I said, these people are not trying to be African. Yeah, I'm not seeing this mass movement of Arabs in North Africa attempting to adopt, you know what I'm saying, African cultures and them kind of things there. And you know what I mean? No, the Arabic is the the language. Islam is the religion.
Let me jump in there.
Go.
Let me jump in there quickly. In 1960, of course, when you had the Organization of African Unity being founded and so on, you don't see a mass of Arabs proclaiming Africanness right now. But during 1960s, when you had the Casablanca group who were aligned with Kwame Nkrumah, that was Egypt, that was Morocco, that was largely Northern African countries, and a lot of Arab presidents who were very much radical Pan-Africanists at the time, left-wing, who wanted actually to push further than the Monrovia group, some of the Black Africans who were a lot more nationalistic and wanted to stick to the borders and the lines that the British gave them. When the Casablanca were like, nah, bond the lines that the British gave us. Let's redraw this line. Let's create a federation in Africa. Let's actually unite. And that sounds a lot closer to what Marcus Garvey had to say. So in the 60s, there were Arab leaders who were united on Garvey's ideology.
I'd give you left-leaning. I wouldn't give you Pan-African, and the reason why I'm saying that is because their agenda was always Arabic. Look, Gaddafi, yeah. When as the sister previously said, yeah, he turned his attention towards the African Union when the Arab world basically you know, dismissed him, yeah. And so he's on record, yeah, as saying, yeah, and I'm just gonna read a couple things on record as saying in 1985 that all efforts, yeah, to unite Egypt, Sudan, Syria, Ethiopia, and Chad were attempts to unite the Arab world as one nation, not the African world, the Arab world. This is in 1985, yeah. So the Arab world is one nation, one people. They speak one language, and they have the same origins, and about 98% of the people have and practice one faith. Yeah. Then he says, in 2001, at the Arab League now, yes, the third of the Arab community living outside Africa should move in with the 2/3 on the continent and join the African Union, which is the only space we have. Yeah. So these people are looking, just like the Europeans, them all over Africa right now, are looking, yeah, to control some part of the African continent for their own benefit. And when they do that, I am yet to see evidence of the fact that they do that to the benefit or without it being a detriment to African people on the continent. I am yet to see that dynamic take place. Yeah, and then finally, yeah, Gaddafi, yeah, in 2007, yeah, says we in North Africa are Arabs, and North Africa is 100% Arab. Those who we say are Berbers are the original unadulterated Arabs. Throughout his tenure, yeah, and his political career, he has this pan-Arabic ideology that permeates, yeah, throughout the thing. And like I said, this is the best, yeah, among them. Yeah, this is the best. So imagine what the rest of them are dealing with. You know, so I get what you're saying. 1960s. What you have to consider is that in that environment, you're talking about Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, Modibo Keïta, Patrice Lumumba. Yes, right. Hold on. My last two sentences. Yeah. You're talking about a heightened energy, yeah, of Black Pan-African movement, yeah, and these people aligned themselves with forces that they felt were going to have influence in the coming years. Since that time, yeah, what role have they played? What role have the Arab played, for example, in Chad, where Gaddafi supported the Arab minority in Chad and invaded Chad to support the Arab minority? You have people from, I know of an activist from Sudan, yeah, called Deng, but he passed away now. But he was from the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement, right? And he spoke about, I remember him speaking about the fact that it was Gaddafi who funded, and other Arab nations who funded, yeah, people who identify as Arab and the Janjaweed in Sudan to oppress African people. So I'm saying we have to take these things into consideration, and we can't just say we accept them because they've been there for a long period of time.
Okay, can I confirm with this? Like, yeah, well, he's dead. Yeah, so you do well to remember that he's dead. Yeah, what you're talking about in terms of the trial work, you've got to understand that they are Africans and Arabs. You know, they are Berber tribes that move in between North Africa and West and East Africa. Yeah, so yes, everything that you said about him is very true, but that is one of the reasons why he's dead, because he was repressing the native African Berbers and the taboo. Go and Google the taboo of Libya. They're as black as you, if not even blacker. Yeah. So that is why he's dead. Yeah. But Gaddafi was still a mixed African Arab. He was not indigenous to the Arab landmass. Yeah. So if there's an African Arab that does that, yeah, a leader that does that, you'll see what happens. Now, when you're saying that there's no sort of movement to Africanize North Africa, that's not actually true. How many of those countries had a revolution?
But Egypt. That's not what I said.
No, one moment. I've not finished. You've had a long time. Can you please mute your mic? Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, all of them had revolutions or uprisings. And one of the things that, and even Morocco had some type of uprising, one of the things that they wanted was to have the native Berber languages on as a national language. So you need to go and do your research. Yeah, that is one of the reasons why in Libya the Berbers took up arms against Gaddafi, and now what you're seeing now he's gone is those African languages being able to be taught in the schools. So you need to do your research before you talk, and stop talking about the North Africans like they're all mixed, like Halle Berry's color and these white ones. They are North Africans that are blacker than you, who have more rights to Africa than what you do. Yeah, because they actually lived there and never left. So make sure when you talk of North Africans, you're telling us who you're talking of. Are you talking about the red ones? The white Africans? Are you talking about the ones that are mixed? Are you talking about the black ones? And stop talking about names. Because I can bring up the ethnic groups in North Africa. Stop treating North Africans like they're all mixed and they're all white. They're not all mixed and white.
Yikes.
Jeez.
Jeez, for real, for real. So on fire. Who's next? Who's up next? Anyone want to respond to Becky?
Yeah, so everyone talk after that.
You all get scared after the fire lion come true.
I'm not scared, you know. I'm trying to see if anybody wants to come in, but there are things that I do have to respond to because I think the system,
respond.
Yeah, respond.
Respect. I think the system misrepresented what I said. I never said that there's no Africans in North Africa. I very much said, and I said from the beginning that there are Africans in North Africa, and I said that they're oppressed and repressed in North Africa. I didn't say that all Africans in North Africa are mixed. I never said that, and I didn't. I said the exact opposite. I said many of the Arabs are not mixed. Yeah. In Africa, and there are Africans in North Africa. I said these things very clearly. I'm not sure if I've not said it clearly enough, but if I haven't said it clearly enough, let me say it again. There are Africans in North Africa, and I align myself with the Africans in North Africa, most of whom are oppressed. I said this, yeah. As far as Gaddafi is concerned, I don't believe he was assassinated because he was oppressing the black people in Libya. I believe he was assassinated because he upset Europe, yeah. And basically Europe was finished with him because he was, you know, if you look to the latter part, he was doing certain deals with Europe and America, Tony Blair and Bush and them kind of things there at certain points as well. And they were basically done with him. So they used the political climate of the Arab Spring and everything else like that to get rid of him. That's what it was. But it had nothing to do. These people were not defending black people in Libya when they assassinated Gaddafi. Yeah, I fundamentally disagree with that. But aside from that, with all due respect, sis, I just want to correct some of what I thought that you misrepresented me about.
I didn't actually misrepresent you, but what you did was, like I'm going to say again, when you talk of North Africa, come out with names. African is not enough, yeah? We all know that African is not what they call themselves. So when I said the taboo, that means in what they call themselves. So when you're talking about a group in Africa, start coming with the names. The word African is not enough. Say you don't fare well, it's like calling me a Nigerian. We don't call ourselves Nigeria. It's a political state. They have a name for themselves. The same way the Wolof, the Fulani, they all have a name. So when you talk of North African, start telling me the names of the groups that you're talking about.
I take your point. I'm not really gonna fight that point. Obviously, I was using a generic term to refer to the indigenous people of the land. African is a term that I would use. I could have said black people in North Africa. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't disagree with the term with the names that you come up with. I'm familiar with those names. We were having a conversation, so I was being generic. And in no way intending to be insulting in my use of a generic term to refer to the indigenous black people of North Africa. But yeah, that's just what it is.
Calm. So I think I'm gonna stick a pin in that there for now, and I'm gonna try to bring the show to a wrap up. I was really hoping that we try and find some conclusions or some center ground, but I don't think we can, because I think there is actually, should I tell you what, before I give some conclusions, Shakara, I will come to you. How do you practically think Pan-Africanism can practically work on the continent then, if we're going to take that position of, like, lay it out for me practically, how it works? How do you remove the Arabs from North Africa? How do you empower the black Africans in North Africa to rule North Africa? How does this work within Pan-Africanism as a practical strategy? And then after that, anyone could respond. And if no one responds to Shakara, we're going to move on to the final question and wrap the show up.
Right, cool. So for me, yeah, there are people that are doing this work, yeah. Like I said, I mentioned Baba Chingwezu earlier, and he's trying to develop, and he has been developing unions, yeah, of what he calls Black Africa, in relation to this issue. The first thing is just to raise the awareness, yeah, in terms of the political presence of Arabs on the land in the first place. Anyway, the solutions in terms of how we move forward will come from that awareness. I don't think we have enough critical mass of awareness as yet. We need to do more research on the conditions of African people, of the various names that our sister mentioned earlier, in North Africa. And talk to them, liaise with them, yeah, in terms of what their experiences are and what needs to be done. But in a generic sense, ultimately, this comes from, I believe, us understanding the cultural unity of Black Africa, yes, and developing a working understanding of that. When I say working understanding of that, I mean an understanding that affects how we develop language, how we develop economy, and how we develop nation states, yeah, or nations, should I say, on the continent itself. There's no simple answer to the question that you're asking, but it first begins with a recognition and us defining who and what we are as a people. You know what I'm saying? And understanding what an invader is, which shouldn't be that difficult to do.
All right, cool. Any responses, please? Anyone that's in the chat, anyone who got anything to say? Otherwise, we're moving the conversation on to the last question, which will be a short question.
Sorry, Scott, man. Could I just add one thing to what I just said?
Go ahead.
Yeah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a brother by the name was Kwesi Pryor, yeah, who's a linguist and an activist, and from Ghana. He now lives in South Africa. A few years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, had a Pan-African Congress where he did this, and it became a big controversy because he disallowed the Arab nations, or those who organized it, disallowed the Arab nations from coming in to the thing. And I think that those kinds of political unions among African people is what is going to help and assist us to develop ways and means of addressing that particular issue. But I just wanted to highlight that because there are people that are doing that work in it. So it's not that we're talking into a vacuum. There are people that on the continent that recognize this dynamic as well.
100%. All right, cool. I've just dropped the question that I want you guys all to answer into our little Hangouts chat, but I'm going to say it out loud since no one wanted to respond to Shakara. I do want to respond to Shakara, and I think I'll respond in my answering of this question. But to be fair, everyone's going to get the chance to answer their question, and I guess you could respond to the person who goes before you in answering your question, but we're not really going to go too much back and forth or arguing at this point. This is really much just a summary point, and we're going to try and wrap the show up here. So please just think about what it is you want to say and then get out. And I'm going to go last. So I'm going to start off with whoever wants to go first. The question is, and this is a question courtesy of Run From Your Wife. Shout out to Run From Your Wife in the chat room. And check out the Discord. He's been in there promoting the Discord hard. If you're not a member of the Discord, join up now and get involved in that, because we keep this debate going after the show as well. So Run For Your Wife, he donated a bit of money, and the question he asked was, what does a successful Africa look like to the panel in terms of economics, politics, military, and culture? Does it represent a European model? Who wants to take this question first?
Yeah, I'll answer that question, bro.
Go
on. I don't know what it looks like, but I know what it doesn't look like, innit? Like, I know that I don't want to see mass poverty. I know that I don't want to see heavy police state, and I'm talking further down the line. Innit? Obviously, there's a progression that needs to happen and a transition that needs to be made. But yeah, certainly it doesn't need to be looking like the European model, because yeah, all of those things that I said I don't want to see, that's what we see here in Europe. So I think, if anything, you should be using European model to know what not to do in it. Like, and as far as I don't know what the hell is going to look like. Do you know what I mean? We could have a city of pyramids for all I know. I don't know. Yeah, but I know that I don't want it to be what I'm living in. You get me? And whether or not some African nations are trying to move towards that, I think we can see that if we just observe how they're moving right now. Just like I said about that video that I was watching, that was very worrying to me. So yeah, I know what I don't want it to look like.
Oh, thanks. Bless for that. Who next?
Can I go, since my answer will probably be shorter than everyone else's? I agree with the last speaker who said that it doesn't necessarily have to be a European. Initially, I was going to say it doesn't have to be a European style of a Pan-African sort of unity, But what I actually came to realize is, you see, the Europeans have done this before. They've killed each other many, many times over, and they finally realized if they have a common interest, it seems to help and stop killing, people killing each other. So that's why they did what they've done. So yes, there are a lot of things that can be taken from the European model, but of course, you guys can learn from their mistakes. That's the advantage of hindsight that you have with that. But yeah, it can be I think the common market is the first thing that should be established. Everything else about military, politics, culture, to be honest, that is way down the line. I think that if you can just agree to have a common market, just sell and trade with each other without killing each other, to me that's what it seems to come down to, because that's what I see all the time. It is really difficult to just stop people from wanting to kill each other. If you can just do that, that is a great first step. And again, I reflect that also to the Middle East. Go ahead.
All right, thanks for that. Stop killing each other. Some good advice, I think. Who's coming next?
Can I?
Yeah. So, sorry. Do you want to go first?
All right. Sorry to interrupt, but quick question before I respond. Are you like the Banksy, like
No,
Banksy?
that's not the Banksy. No.
All right. Okay. I was asking in it because I'm a big fan. Anywho, I want to say an African is anybody who takes pride in the nation and the culture and the continent that they're on. And I think, first of all, you got to start within and make people happy with who they are right now. And I don't think people living in Africa are happy where they are, because some of the African states are in the state that they're in, that there's a massive migrant crisis that's going on in Europe right now. But some people might call it karma to what they did like 100 years ago. But definitely people need pride. They need to accept that they're African. Second step is obviously, like, I think one of the guys did say that it is definitely dependent on looking at America or Europe or wherever you are in Australia, it doesn't matter, like looking at the Western world and looking at their mistakes and not making to a communist state, as same as not making it to a super capitalist state where there's profit. So I think Africa is fresh, so we can do a lot what we want to do with it. And if we just link arms like the Europeans did back in the day, like in the 1940s after World War II, I definitely think that it can get somewhere. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
And next person.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, I think we need to basically unite. Africa needs to be, continent that comes together. And obviously, we know that's the Europeans' worst nightmare at the end of the day. But we need to understand first and foremost the reason why Africa has fallen so much from our greatest stage is because we're being played like puppets. Okay, Africa is still on a string, even after slavery's ended, independence. We're still being played. Okay, and as long as we're leaning on Europeans and now China, which is recolonizing Africa. If you don't know, and if anyone doesn't know, they're recolonizing Africa, but this in a more strategic way. If we keep leaning on others and don't come together, band together to help ourselves, then we will never ever grow, and we will never be able to defend ourselves against others who are obviously keeping us underneath their foot. So Africa, first and foremost, needs to move away from other people, needs to detract our interests from westernization and actually come together in a cocoon-like strategy and build from there. Without that, there will always be another people, whether it's Arab, whether it's Chinese, whether it's Westerners that will want a piece of Africa. It's as simple as that. We can only help ourselves.
Oh, I'm blessed for that. Only help ourselves. Anyone who's next?
I'll do the question. I'm going to read directly from the African Union's website, Agenda 2063, and when we're talking about the integration of Africa in order to facilitate a Pan-African identity We're talking about an integrated high-speed train network that is being planned, a virtual and e-university, an African forum, a continental free trade, African passport, meaning a Pan-African passport that gives the free movement of people around the whole of Africa, silencing the guns, and a single train, air transport and continental financial institutes, and also integrated transport as well as roads. So they are plans that are laid out, like roads going from Algiers in Algeria to Lagos, Nigeria, from Senegal, Dakar to Djibouti. All these things are laid out. If anybody's interested in the integrated plans for Africa, please check out the African Union's website. Be part of the change that you want to see.
I want to say something before for next person. Thing is with me and the African Union, it's a massive thing, but I think I don't want to disrespect anybody, but the African Union since its inception in 1991 has been useless in terms of solving in issues such as places like Somalia and the Central African Republic and many other places across Africa, resolving the issues of getting them those kind of states back into functioning. So it is really good that they want to internet connect people through like various different things like transport, education, passport and whatnot. But it's kind of, I see the African Union similar to the United Nations. Do you know what I mean? Every single country, in African Union, I know they're trying to copy the European Union, but every single African country didn't have the consent to join. It was sort of like a free pass and it automatically joined as soon as its inception, as compared to European countries when you had to fight to join in. And I'm sure like people have looked up how hard it was for the Eastern European countries, like poor, European countries, where it took them a long time. So I don't know. I'm a bit, me and the African Union, I don't really go, and that's kind of my preference. But I'm sure like people from various different places in Africa would disagree. But I think the African Union was created by, the European Union because, various different things, like they don't support themselves. They lean on other financial aids from the US and America. So that's what I wanted to say. It's okay.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm jumping there quickly before the next person jumps in. I hear you. And the African Union was actually an Pan-Africanist creation, but I do agree with you that right now in its current form, it's toothless. And there's a lot of people in the group, in the chat, agreeing with you as well. It's a toothless, and actually it's taken a lot of influence in recent days from the European Union, a lot of finance and money from the European Union too. So they depend on the EU. So anyway. Anyone else who want to jump in quickly? It's your last chance really to say something. So when I start talking, it's going to be it.
Can I just talk in relation to what she said? Okay, yeah, that's already on the agenda. One of the last agenda on the African Union was the fact that it's not financing itself. It needs to rely on Europe, as you say, and stuff like that. So that is already in the problem. But one of the problems is many African countries are not paying their dues. The countries that end up paying the dues were Libya, Nigeria, other big countries, South Africa, the countries that have big economies. Other smaller countries were not paying their dues. So that is up to the smaller countries to sort their issues out. But it takes time because at the end of the day, the damage that was done to Africa was done over hundreds of years. It's the things that are going to be solved in Africa, you will be dead by the time all these things happen. It is your children, their children that will enjoy it.
Absolutely. But I just want to say also, there's a reason why these smaller countries aren't paying, and I think one of the two main parts is, I hate to say this, but sometimes they're a failed state. They're not working. They're not functioning, and there's corruption within the African presidents. And every single time that there's an African leader that comes into power, it's hijacked. Like, I don't know what happens. Somebody just like whisk that person away, and they get hijacked and they don't get to do what they wanted to do, and that's why the fees aren't paying because of corruption and whatnot. But like an example would be every single time there's a new president that comes into an African parliament or prime minister, they straight away they don't go to an African country. Like it's like recently the Ethiopian president, there's a first Oromo Ethiopian president, for example, and they don't go to places like, you know, or the new Kenyan president comes over, you know, they don't go to Nigeria, they don't go to Angola, they don't go to South Africa, they go to France, they go to England, they go to America, you know what I mean? So that's what I want to say.
Yeah, I was just gonna say as well, the new president of Ghana, Addo, he before he was even inducted into, you know, becoming the president of Ghana, he was in London speaking to the big boys. So literally, you have to go through that passage. Africa is not free. That's what people don't understand. It's not free. It's still slaved. So I just wanted to add that in as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I did want to jump in, but I just want to quickly say this was, I think, what Shakara is always. I'm presuming this is where it's know your enemy. Those who pretend to be your friend are not necessarily your friend, and those who don't care about you are not necessarily your enemy. This is I think it's know your enemy is the number one thing, and I think a lot of African nations don't recognize that. Go ahead.
I think they do, but they know their life will be taken. The people that get into these positions know that their life will be taken. It's happened so many times, you know, whenever Africans, you know, go against the structure that the Europeans want them to follow, their life is taken like that. So that is the problem.
I was going to touch on that point, and this is me answering the question here, Captain Scotland. But I would start by saying what it looks like to me first and foremost is where land and natural resources is organized towards the benefit of African people. One of the things that I put in that category is food self-sufficiency. Food self-sufficiency presupposes the fact that you have a thriving agricultural sector. I would say nationalization of natural resources and putting those the profits from that and investing it into technological development. And in order to be balanced, let me just say that I know that Gaddafi had nationalized some of the natural resources, an idea which he got from many of our great Pan-African leaders from before. So my point is that I don't deny that he done some things that I think we could that will be beneficial for us to take on. I don't think those ideas originated with him, but I acknowledge that he did certain things. Despite what I think about his overall agenda, I would say an Africa where indigenous African languages are the language of instruction, as in education, in law, and in government. I would say where we use modernized governmental systems, that are based upon indigenous governance systems on the continent of our own culture. So we do away with Westminster democracy and jurisprudence. That's that way. I would say where indigenous spirituality is the majority, spiritual expression on the continent, because that represents our own culture. And I would say where there's a functional representation from the African diaspora, where many people try to do this. Now, the last thing I want to say is that we shouldn't have this conversation and answer this question as though we have not had victories. We had this conversation the other day, Scattered Minds, in terms of the fact of recognizing that we're at war and we've had victories and we've had losses, we've had setbacks as well. Do you know what I'm saying? But when we look at this thing about not killing each other, like we look at people like Patrice Lumumba, who was known to be a uniter of the various groups, so-called tribes, I use the word nations, within the nation of Congo. There are examples of Julius Nyerere, who gave us examples in terms of how to develop independent economic systems from the basis of family. He called that the Ujamaa, it's called the Ujamaa model, or the Ujamaa economic model. There's people like Thomas Sankara. He made his nations food self-sufficient in 4 years. He's one of them leaders that was spoken about earlier in terms of who was killed and assassinated. And off the continent, you have people like Maurice Bishop in Grenada, whose governmental systems, for example, he was actually able to work wonders in terms of subsidizing the agricultural sector in Grenada, and popularizing certain technology that the farmers had developed to get rid of pests, invested that. You know what I mean? So we have these examples. We ain't got to reinvent it, but we have examples that we have to build on. And then in this modern age, there's a brother by the name of Kemi Seba, yeah?
Yeah.
Currently lives in Benin. And I'm mentioning that because we have to realize that there's a whole quote unquote French speaking African world. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, but he's working wonders at the moment in terms of organizing many of the nations who were formerly colonized by France to get rid of the French currency. Yeah. What is going on in quote unquote French West Africa right about now is criminal. Absolutely criminal in terms of the continued colonization of France, and this brother is developing a mass movement really to just do that, get rid of the French currency, and so that's another example that we can look at.
Can I just carry on from what he's saying in terms? I think you meant the continued colonization of Africa. So what we're talking about in terms of France colonial tax that's still enforced for Africans. So there's an article, and it basically says in July 2014, 14 African countries were obliged by France through a colonial pact to put 85% of their foreign reserves in a French central bank under the French minister. They are effectively putting $500 billion every year to the French treasury. African leaders that refuse are killed or a victim of a coup. So that is what the brother's talking about. So what they're basically saying, despite that the two main African banks having African names, they have no monetary policy of their own. France only allows them to access 15% of their money in a given year. If they need any more, they need to borrow the extra money from the 65% from the French treasury at commercial rates. So that's what he's talking about.
All right, thank you very much. And was there, like I say, last comment, very last one right now, and then I'm gonna wrap it up. No more comments.
I'll just wrap up now, bro.
All right, cool. I'm gonna start.
Wakanda forever.
All right, cool. Now I'm gonna keep you around, Banksy, but other people, if you're out of comments, I'm gonna eject you from the chat. And it's no disrespect. Hopefully, come around next time. Might keep a couple people around just in case. I might want a couple response because I'm gonna talk now. So I'm gonna keep a couple of you in here. And I'm gonna keep you, Banksy. I'm sorry, everybody else, because I like a little bit of controversy. And I want to say my last bit here and answer that question and respond. And I'll keep the chat up and see what you guys are saying in the chat room. And we'll have a little 5-minute maybe question and answer at the end, and then we're just gonna wrap it up and just give it back to Kalam and Titans and say thank you for hosting us. We've gone near 3 hours now, and that's like almost an hour and a half longer than I wanted to. But yeah, as it were. If you've got comments or any questions, now is the time to get me, and I'll be taking questions. The main question that was given to me on this topic, well, the main topic was about Arabs in Africa, and the main question that we wrapped up was what does a successful Africa look like? And to the panel in terms of economics, politics, military, and culture, and does it represent a European model? And I want to answer this question in conjunction with the question about do Arabs belong to Africa? For me, a successful Africa is very difficult for us to sit here now and to say it or to explain it, because it's something that's working in a development, to be fair. Successful Europe, no one knew what a successful Europe looked like until the Europeans kind of got there and they stumbled there. They've done it through wars and conquest, through fighting each other, through going for attacking each other, and eventually coming back together, unifying, and deciding, you know what, it's better to go and conquer the rest of the world than each other to some extent, even though they did fight each other whilst conquering the rest of the world. So to a certain extent, my ultimate goal or aim for vision for what Africa will look like is not something that it could be said completely right now. Especially, I think also we have to look at the moving reality, and that's where I come to my position on the Arab countries in North Africa. And that's why I've kept a few people in here, because I know there might be a little bit of disagreement to this. But my thing is, within North Africa, historically, so much time has passed, and like I said, you'd have to go all the way back to Carthage to go back to the first conquerors of North Africa, to be fair. And we're talking about thousands of years now, and thousands of years of history, which really in many ways have actually made Africa. And I think what I'm particularly attracted to about Pan-Africanism is the idea that, you know, it's a range of ideas, cultures, beliefs, all from under that African banner. And I think the African banner goes from anywhere being the indigenous, quote unquote, Bantu Africans, to the Cushitic Africans, to the Neolithic Africans, and yes, to the North African, the Berbers, and to the Arabs. Because I've always considered the Arabian Peninsula to actually be the African Peninsula and actually to be a part of Africa historically and currently. I think currently we have cultural and political dominant forces that are really playing a role with how first the Europeans and the West carved up the map, and how the Arabs have then taken advantage of that carved map as well through the spreading of a political type of version of Islam rather than just Islam itself. But however, I'd say, like what we had in the 1960s, you had people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, who was definitely a Pan-Africanist, and you had many other Pan-Africanists from that region of North Africa. And actually, you look at Frantz Fanon, who was from Guadeloupe, speaking about French Francophone Africa. He was from Guadeloupe and actually played a prominent role in the independence of Algeria. You know, Pan-Africanism played a huge role in early North African identities, and I think it could play a huge role again. I was talking to some Somalian brothers even, and it was played a huge role in early Somali identities. The first president of Somali, Siabari, he was a Somali, he was a Pan-Africanist, sorry. He was their president at the first Pan-African conferences, and he was very much involved. So I think in the development of the new idea of what we want Africa to look like, we have to join together the thoughts of all the different groups within Africa, for all the different tribal groups, all the different ethnic groups, all the different nations and states there in Africa. You have to actually draw them all together and actually find the common points that unite them together, what they want. And indeed, what Betty said and pointed out to us with the AU agenda, it shows quite clearly there's a lot of people already doing it. The question is, how do we now take this political ideology, enshrine it as an ideology, and make and package it so every young Black child who is out there who identifies with Africa, you know, could access this ideology easily, could understand it from start to finish, and could see a way forward for themselves and for Africa. And that's actually the role of what a lot of these conversations are about, is how do we create the ideology now that they could see. And I think we have to do it by actually talking to the Arabs who actually do see themselves as African. And there are some, they might not be in the majority. And we have to talk to the North Africans, who are the indigenous Africans, who are the Black Africans, who might not be in the majority. And a lot of them will have different opinions to us, or different views on the way forward. But that's the way we actually come to an idea, is actually there's going to have to be some compromise. I see some people in the chat, shout out to Everything is Everything. I see you, brother. He's saying that Skymind is a bit of coon. I think that's referred to my willingness to allow North Africans to be into in Africa. And I think it's about, you know, you have to be practical with this. There's no way we could go back over 1,000 years, cut through anyone's identity and decide who's African and who's not, to be fair. It's going to have to go on a certain amount of self-selection. It's going to have to be a certain amount of looking into how people behave towards other Africans on the continent. Is there an era of superiority, or is there actually a love and a shared sort of communal mentality between them? So I think that's the way forward in regards to producing Pan-Africanism for the new age, or to continue with Pan-Africanism for the new age. And I think, yes, that will include some Arabs, but those Arabs will have to be very clear in standing alongside their African brothers and saying, yo, we're Africans, and that's what we put first. And if they're not willing to do that, then I think very clearly we can't accept them. I don't think it's just a matter for Arabs to do that. I think it's a matter for all Africans to do that. If you're going to come here with your Yoruba pride, or your Igbo pride, or your Amhara pride, and you're only willing to look at things from the perspective of your own tribe or ethnic group, and you're not willing to look at things from the perspective of the wider range of African cultures, then you're not going to be helpful to Pan-Africanism. And I think we should just take that response, not just to Arabs, but to everybody in Pan-Africanism. That being said, I don't think that therefore extends to white South Africans, as the brother, what's his name, Banksy said. I don't think that extends to white South Africans. White South Africans are a lot more recent, a lot more clear line can be drawn there. We can look into it and see very clearly where white South Africans have come from, why they've come from there, and what they've done since getting there. And we could actually clearly see whose land they've come from, who they've taken land from, and who's been affected by them, and who that land could go back to. So that works a lot easier, in my opinion, than the North African question. Hence why I think the answer to the North African question is Arabs who are willing to work with us, we should work with them. And those who aren't willing to work with us, we won't work with them. And that's it on that regard. So as for how does the development of how our Pan-Africanism or Africa look, I definitely would say not the European model. I'd say we have to find our own unique model. I would say Africans are naturally democratic anyway, but we have our own ideas and views of how democracy should be looked at. So I think we should go on democratic principles and ideas, but look at them within the idea of how a democracy would best work in Africa, because the current democracy or the current Westminster system and the American presidential system, which they try and emulate within Africa, it doesn't work for the nature of the people. And actually, we have a lot of unique, our own individual, historical unique systems and ideologies that we put together as to how we can run countries. And we've had a lot of tribal systems and a lot of networks which will actually work better. And that's why, if you look into the history of Pan-Africanism, there's been these two groups, Casablanca and Monrovia. And the Casablanca group is the one I'm on. I really believe Africa needs to redraw its borders, to re-look at its borders, and to really actually think, you know, like the sister Betty was saying earlier, there's, you know, people don't necessarily refer to themselves as being from this country. They say they're Fulani, they're this, they're that. However, you're going to find Fulani in more than one country in West Africa. You're going to find Hausa in more than one country. You could even find Hausa as far as Sudan. So these tribes are far and wide apart, and the borders we have don't actually pay reference to that reality. So sorry, I'm going to start ranting for a bit, but I want to say the idea of Pan-Africanism is actually not a scientific method. I've seen you talking a lot. Pan-Africanists aren't pro-humanist. We're not against the idea of all humans being equal and all humans come together. The actual idea is this, and it's a very simple one that I want all of you guys to get here. Black people have been mistreated by majority of people across the world, historically up until this day. And so therefore, for Black people to come together with other groups, we're going to need to actually make sure, first of all, we are looking after ourselves and we put ourselves on an equal footing first. And that's how we see it. So before we come to joining and helping fight for human rights for all humans across the board, we want to make sure that our people and the people who have been discriminated against, similar to us, are looked after, and the people who are on our continent are looked after. And it's that simple. Now, as a Garveyite, I see a comment in there. I am reading your comments at the same time, believe me. As a Garveyite, yeah, I am a Garveyite. And Garveyite was not specifically was never actually at any point anti-Arab, but he was definitely for Africa for Africans. He never specified which Africans he was talking about, and North Africans were certainly Africans. And Pan-Africanism went beyond Garvey, do you know what I mean? And like I say, I went beyond Pan-Africanism to the Casablanca group. So, you know, a student of Garvey or someone who followed Garvey a lot was Kwame Nkrumah. And Kwame Nkrumah was quite firmly in the Casablanca group with people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was an Arab. So, you know, that's my stand. But shout out to you, Thomas Sankara. I love him. He was a bit of a communist, a Marxist. He was aligned with Cuba and Fidel Castro. He I got a picture of Fidel up there actually. He is quite left wing. I can't remember. I think he led up until about 1985, but I'm not sure exactly. In Burkina Faso, he was a true Pan-Africanist, and he was leading a lot of ideas. But like we've said a lot in this chat, when you've had strong Pan-Africanist leaders, they have tended to be assassinated or overthrown. You're going to need to Scattered Minds if you want me to see your question, because otherwise I'm not going to see it properly. But yeah, as I was saying, my position is a little bit different because I would like to see bring all Africa. So the future for Africa is not on European lines. It's going to be definitely along African lines. And it would definitely have to be the development of those African institutions that we have. And if they're not there already, we have to actually create them. My role in that is, as an African who is not on the continent here in diaspora, there's not only so much you can play in supporting what happens on diaspora. What I can do here is I can join with my like-minded brothers, which I do now. We create and actually helped to form this ideology here in the UK, disseminate this ideology here in the UK. I mean, a lot of people have to understand, before Israel was created, Jews have been pushing the Zionism ideology for a very long time. And whilst I'm not a big fan of Zionism or the ideology behind it, they had success to that. They created a political ideology, they stuck to it, and they all stuck behind that. And like I say, Garvey, along with many other Pan-Africanists, created Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism is a spectrum on which you could sit on any wing. But I think as Pan-Africanists, the most important thing for us is to stop trying to differentiate ourselves too much from other sides and say, you know what, let's go with what works. So if you're a Garveyite Pan-Africanist, let's run with that. And if you're a Du Boisite Pan-Africanist, and that's what's working, or you know, if that's what you're doing, I'm not going to actually stop you or going to attack you for doing that. I'm going to say, you know what, do your thing. I'm going to do my thing. Because at the end of the day, we've got the progression of African people in mind. But yeah, I did want to just make it very clear that the progression of African people does not mean the oppression of any other people. And I'm all for other communities gathering together. So if you're an Arab and you're watching this and you want to get on a Pan-Arab thing, do that. Focus on building up your own countries, building up institutions and education in your country. As long as it's not about oppressing other people, as long as it's not about being better than other people, I'm all for it. And if you want to be a Pan-European or Pan-White, I'm all for it. But I think the question is, and I saw this comment earlier, so I want to respond to this finally before I go back to the remainders of the panel. But the question of this is, and I can't remember who it was, Brown or something like that, about me being a Pan-Africanist, but being against white people being Pan-Europeanist, or against Europeans for Europe for Europeans. I'm all for Europeans having their own Pan-Europeanism and their own identity and their own political sort of way of viewing things. The problem is when you're European and you start being anti-immigration and so talking about Europe for Europeans, you kind of have to understand the sort of historical place where it's come from. Do you know what I mean? Europe went around the world telling people about Europe. It's not like people found out about Europe and just said, yo, let's all go to Europe. Do you know what I mean? Europeans went around the world and told people about Europe. You actually went to other people's country, and it was so arrogant. You actually renamed other people's country, you know, New France, New Spain, New England. You actually done this. So the historical context is very important here. And so I'm all for white and English people having self-determination and having a right to determine your own future, your own identity, have your own political ideologies and all of this sort of stuff. But like, don't do it in an ignorant way that's devoid of the history. You went around, like British or European people went around the world, telling the world about Europe, renaming parts of the world after Europe. And then when those people who are living in those renamed parts of the world decide to come to your country, you have a problem with it. It seems a bit like you're trying to have your cake and eat it. Do you know what I mean? So I think you need to. So that's my position. It's not like I have a problem with white people developing Pan-Europeanism or whatever it is you want to do. It's just be fair and be equal with it. Do you know what I mean? Like Europe, Pan-Europeanism has been the status quo across the world. Period. You know, when you look at the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, the IMF, all of these huge institutions, they're all created by European guys. You know what I mean? White people, for the benefit of Europe and for white people. So, you know, Pan-Europeanism kind of already exists, to be fair. Maybe the issue is that you're not part of it, and that might be why, you know, you're a little bit upset. And maybe that's something for you to do within your own community and not to get upset at anybody else about. I got one more question I saw there. I lost it still, kind of. So maybe, actually, 1 second. Yeah, I agree with you. Pan-Africanism is already in the process in Africa. I'm not denying that. I'm saying, are we all as a one community, as we were saying to Kalam earlier before the show really kicked off, we don't have a black community. So how can we implement Pan-Africanism as a unified political ideology that we could all tap into, from UK to Jamaica to Trinidad to Nigeria to Atlanta, America, somewhere? Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm talking about with that. And with that, I think that's the last question. Come back. Yo, big up everyone in the chat. Thanks for everyone who tuned in the show. It's been a lot longer than I expected to be sat here, trust me. Need to go eat my dinner, pray, chill. So yeah, let me come back to the panel quickly. I just ranted. I went off for a little bit. I'm gonna let you guys have your say, and then we'll wrap it up and end the show. Anyone wants to jump in first?
I just like to see people. Oh, it's got a Scan minds.
Yo, sorry, 1 second, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to people, anyone who's interested in helping Africa and its people in the diaspora in Africa, please check out the African Union and Agenda 2063, and all the plans are there. It especially says that anyone who wants to help Africa, who sees themselves as an African, is welcome. It's not calling every single person of African descent to come. Yeah, it's not a dictatorship. Yeah, it's asking people who see themselves as African and want to help Africa to contribute. Come and be part of the change that you want to see. And God bless.
Okay, I'll go because I want to actually listen to Shaka Ra at the end of the conversation. But dude, I'm telling you, I know you think that I'm abrasive towards you. I just push back a little bit, just to see how you come back at me, because I want you to sort of knock down my arguments. I want to see these arguments these thoughts that I have, which are extremely sort of what's it called? They're very they're not positive. They're very negative ideas, because I'm a very pessimistic concept of the world, and that's the problem. Because I see, this is what I was saying about know your enemy. You see, Pan-Africanism or Pan-Arabism, even, which is a lot of, even Gaddafi was talking about that at one point. These things are not in a, you can't do these. You're not in a vacuum. Your enemies are going to push back at this. You think if Nigeria decides to set up an exchange system for their oil, anything other than the petrodollar, America is just going to sit back and take that? See, there are so many moving parts in this that it is unbelievable. That there's the petrodollar situation. There's all these natural resources. You think Apple is just going to let go of all the resources that they're sucking out of Africa to build their iPhones and iPads with? No, they're not just going to let you take that shit away from them. This is my problem. The enemies are all around us, and they want what we have in our lands.
All right. No, that's all right. Thank you. That's all right. No, that's true. No, I think those are just bigger conversations and bigger topics. And like I say, Titans, shout out to Kalam. He's let me take over the show every Thursday from 7. So we'll be doing this again next week. Hopefully Shakara will come and we can talk about some of those conversations around security and how we intend to actually hold or maintain Pan-Africanism once it's established, if possible. But that's not a conversation for today or right now to get into, because today we're just specifically asking the Arab question.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say in terms of can I say in terms of Africans, like security, and in Nigeria, we have Nigerian men who know how to fight. We have, for one, Jediah. He's trained in weapons. He knows how to fight, so you don't have to worry about Nigerian men being brave enough to deal in weapons. There's plenty of African men who know how to fight, so don't worry about it. And if they die, they will die. It's better to die for what you believe in than to live for what you don't. So don't worry about it. We won't need your help as an Iranian. There's plenty of African men who know how to fight, as well as we can call our brothers in the Caribbean. And as you can see, we got gang. They're trained. Many of them are trained.
All right, Lioness.
So don't worry about
it. Betty is trained too. Trust. She'll deal with you in a minute, so we don't have to worry. But before we do that, Shakara, quickly and not quickly. Say your thing, man. Do your thing.
Yeah, I want to just begin by saying that reading and studying is very important. Yeah, the people that run governments and form governments, they study. Yeah. In terms of the principles and the ideas that it's going to take to really make a nation self-sufficient. One of the key books that I've read, and I think in terms of the Arab issue, I think this book would agree with Scattered Minds. It's the point. It's the only real point that I really disagree with the book on. But it's called Black Africa: The Economic and Cultural Basis for a Federated State by Sheikh Anta Diop. Yeah, and in the book, what he's really outlining is the cultural, economic, and political basis for developing a unified, liberated Africa. And so he starts really from looking at the language, and his argument really is that African languages are really have a common origin, yeah. And so tracing back those lines, we can see the natural basis for political and economic unity and development, yeah. So I'll say that again. Black Africa, the economic and cultural basis for a federated state. Very, very important book. Yeah, not to say that you're going to agree with everything that's in the book, but in terms of the ideas that he's outlining and the problems that he's trying to solve, they're markers. Yeah, in terms of the problems that we need to solve. You know, in today's world, there's many other books. Decolonizing the African Mind is another book that I'd suggest. By Chinwezu, decolonizing. What's the book called? Decolonizing the Mind, yeah, by Ngugi, yeah, where he talks about he's a novelist, a novelist from Kenya, yeah, who he doesn't write in English anymore. Yeah, he writes all of his novels in his native Kikuyu language, and then he translates it into English, yeah, as a statement of affirming African culture and them kind of things there. So I look you know, forward to reasoning with brothers and sisters, you know what I'm saying, in terms of the themes, yeah, that these brothers and sisters are trying to solve. Finally, I was going to big up Scattered Minds, you know what I'm saying, for inviting me on this particular panel. And yeah, if whenever you call me for this Thursday and I am available, I will be here. I must admit, in terms of I only just started going to Speaker's Corner, and I just appreciated the energy that you brought to the park. And you know what you was trying to bring in terms of the conversations, and so in harmonizing with that, I'm here. You know what I'm saying? And so give thanks to what the work that you're trying to do. And it's just I'm humbled to just make a contribution to the vibration.
Calm, blessed for that. Blessed for that. Can you hear me? If I'm coming through, I think cool. Yeah. All right, cool. So. Yeah, I just see my camera back on now. We're live. So thank you for everyone who tuned in for this. We've done 3 hours. I can't believe I sat here and there's still 100 of you in the chat room. If you haven't liked it yet, please like. Show some love. If you haven't subscribed, please go to Scattered Minds Show. Click on my name, Scattered Minds. Subscribe. Just search me, and you'll find more content similar to this. Also subscribe to all the speakers here. Shaka Ross Speak. Subscribe to Betty's Closet, I think it is now, or I'm not sure exactly. But subscribe to Betty's channel as well, because Betty keeps it real. And thanks to everyone in the channel. As for sorting out the streets or sorting out Africa, don't worry, we're sorting out the streets as well before we sort out Africa. We're sorting out our own community, don't worry. You guys focus on sorting your own street. That guy singing "Oh Tommy Tommy," stop singing "Oh Tommy Tommy" and focus on fixing your own community. Because Tommy's not going to save you, trust me. You're not going to have to save your own community. Shout out to everybody in there that wants to save their own community and actually is doing work within their community. Love to everybody who joined and listened for the whole time. Press like, subscribe, share, all them kind of things there. And I think we're just going to wrap this out. I'm going to shout to Kalam and let him. He's probably going to sleep now. You know, the line's just going to run all night now. But
I guarantee he's not sleeping. I know he's not sleeping. I know he's not sleeping. I was listening hard.
I'll be real with you. I'll actually be real with you. I fell asleep and I've only woke up in the last 5 minutes. And it's like, it was perfect timing still. You could still hear the hoarseness in my voice. You know, certain ladies tuned in right now. They're like, Kalam, is that you? Yeah. Yeah, buddy. So family, I'm so happy to actually have you guys on here today, bringing something completely new to Titans TV. I'm gonna catch up on everything that's transpired whilst I've been sleeping. I apologize that I haven't been able to input much, but it looks like you guys literally held down the show. You did a great job. You guys are saying it's 3 hours. I don't even know what the time is right now. So if you held it down for 3 hours, and I see there's 111 likes right now. It seems though that you guys done a fantastic job. Let us know, family, in the comment section. Drop some ones if you want to see the brothers and the sisters come back on here again to do another show next week, Thursday, 7 p.m. Or should I say approximately 7 p.m. because you never know what's going to happen. You lot might just call me out to go somewhere else, right? And then it's going to be a crazy thing. So yeah, family. Thank you guys for supporting Titans TV. Thank you guys for supporting Scattered Minds and this particular podcast. All right, family. I'm gonna shut it down. And if you guys wanna come in and speak with us at the end, please do come in and speak with us. But we're shutting it down now. Thank you, and I'll see you guys on the other side. Oh man.